Chapter 721, Scavenging. Kelly's question made Doze fall silent again. After a moment he replied in a low, powerless voice, "Lady Kelly going to sea is too dangerous for me." Seeing that Kelly didn't speak, he mustered courage to defend himself. "Actually, it wasn't just me. Almost all the third-level apprentices who came with Mentor Kaz chose to stay. When Mentor Kaz finally left, he only had one third-level apprentice and a few second-level apprentices with him." Kelly sighed. This was each person's own choice, she couldn't interfere. At this time, perhaps because the wagon had stopped for a while, the carriage curtains were lifted slightly, with several pairs of eyes secretly watching from behind. Seeing this, Kelly changed the topic. "What are you doing now? Working for Baton Academy, or have you joined some wizard organization?" "I'm on my own now. Here, without joining an organization, I work directly for Kaugus City. Those people behind are refugees I brought back from the Kema and Kina's border." Kelly raised her eyebrows. Abducting people from the Kema Duchy. Population was a major matter for any country. A second-level apprentice like Doze shouldn't dare privately smuggle people. "No, Lady Kelly." Doze naturally knew Kelly came from a noble family in the Kema Duchy and quickly explained. "Kema and Kinas have had small-scale wars for years, so the number of refugees and slaves keeps growing. These are people I bought from there, already approved by local lords." Doze even showed Kelly the permit documents he kept hidden. Kelly knew Grand Duke Kira didn't want Kema's population to continue decreasing, but she was powerless to stop border lords from trading in people. But Kelly didn't understand. What does Kaugus City want so many refugees for? The nearby towns had already been emptied by Kaugus. How were they still buying people? "This, I don't know either. I'm just responsible for delivering people to the outer city." Doze continued with his head down. "Forget it, I won't think about it. The marquis position went to my brother anyway." Kelly pouted, not wanting to inquire further. "Then I won't delay your time. Go ahead with your work." After speaking, Kelly flew back to the large rock where she had been meditating and sat with closed eyes. Doze quickly bowed again. Only then did he return to his wagon and continue his journey. Kelly's location wasn't far from Kaugus's outer city. After Doze continued his journey, he soon successfully passed through the outer city gates and entered the outer city. After entering the outer city, he followed his usual route to an office, found a third-level apprentice, handed over the people in his wagon, and received a small bag of magic crystals. But just before leaving, Doze suddenly remembered meeting Kelly today. That red-haired, freckled girl had grown into a graceful young woman. If not for the familiar mental power fluctuations, Doze wouldn't have dared recognize her. Although Kelly's mental power was familiar, its intensity almost made him unable to breathe. Thinking that she had at least advanced to true wizard, while he was still a second-level apprentice, Doze's heart that had been cowering for years was suddenly awakened. Gritting his teeth, he stopped the third-level apprentice who was about to leave. "Senior, we've brought in so many people, but why don't we see them appear in the outer city?" Unexpectedly, the third-level apprentice's face immediately darkened, and his originally kind smile disappeared. "What, you're curious? If you're really particularly curious, I can have you escort them over." Doze's heart jumped, immediately knowing these refugees' destination must be complicated. He quickly smiled apologetically. "No, I was just asking casually. You go ahead with your work, I won't disturb you." Doze left in fear. The third-level apprentice remaining at the office snorted coldly, watching him leave. After leaving, Doze thought for a moment, then ran to the trading center and used magic crystals he had saved over the days to buy a magic book. Holding the expensive book that had passed through who knows how many hands, he thought silently, "I don't seek to advance to true wizard, but third-level apprentice should be possible, right? There. Saul picked up a damaged book from the dust, carefully shaking off the dust on it. This was a magic notebook. It looked like it had weathered many storms. Despite Saul's careful handling, several pages still fell to the ground along with the dust. After leaving the small building where Wizard Jonah had been, Saul didn't immediately head to Baton Academy, but seemed to wander aimlessly around the academy like he wasn't doing proper work. Sometimes he would pick up books left by wizards like now. Sometimes he would stay in a room for a while. The book he found this time was a true wizard's magic notebook. Hand-bound, very thick, but the magical markings on it had disappeared. Some experimental insights. I can take this back for the new people at the Wizard Tower to study. Saul picked up the pages that had fallen to the ground, casually stuffed them back, then put the book in his storage device. It seems the disaster that erupted in the inner city had quite a large radiation range. These simple magic books and magical formations have all been ruined. Penny was also flying around the room, helping Saul search for useful materials. On the other side, Herman put down several glass bottles in his hands and turned to Saul helplessly. "Master, the materials here have all been polluted and deteriorated. They can't be used." "That's normal. Materials left outside generally don't have very good protective measures. See if there are any secret chambers or such places. Physical secret chambers are hard to detect through mental power scanning." Herman nodded, then found a wall and phased through it. His spirit-body identity was very useful at times like this. Physical facilities without magical power basically couldn't stop him. Saul continued searching through the original owner's notes and books, but while searching, he found these things seemed to have traces of being disturbed. The dust thickness on the bookshelves was uneven. "Brother Saul, Brother Saul." Penny flew to a corner, then suddenly flew back. Saul thought Penny had made some new discovery, but instead heard her say excitedly, "I found living people again." Oh, Saul became interested. "Where?" Penny said, "There are two people, and they're consciously hiding their existence, which is why I discovered their dreams." Being able to consciously hide their existence means they're either wizards like Jonah but in better condition, or other intruders. Caugust's inner city defenses were both strict and loose. Relying entirely on magical formation protection without human intervention, once wizards like Saul found the method, they could exploit loopholes to get in. People interested in Caugust definitely aren't just us. Maybe these people will know what happened in the inner city. Saul raised his hand to summon Herman, who was crashing around inside the house, then put away the nightmare butterfly and flew directly out of the room toward where Penny had discovered the living people. Along the way, Saul deliberately restrained his magical power fluctuations, maintaining them around second rank. His approach soon alerted the two targets. But what slightly surprised Saul was that the first one to come out and ambush him was actually a cat. Chapter 722, White Beard and Orange Cat. Saul had already flown to the position Penny indicated, but there were no visible people in sight. "They're hiding." Saul landed on the ground. "You flew over so conspicuously. Normal people would first hide and observe, right?" Penny complained from within the diary. Just as Saul and Penny were bantering, a thin black shadow suddenly rushed toward Saul from a crack in the wall. "Meow! Meow!" Saul casually waved his hand, sweeping the black shadow back against the wall. The shadow hit the wall, letting out a shrill cat cry. "It's actually a cat," Herman said incredulously. "A cat dared to attack you." "He, has it been driven mad by pollution radiation?" "Or," Saul stepped forward and planted his foot on the dirty cat that had slid from the wall to the ground. "Is this exactly what you want me to misunderstand?" "Ah, it hurts, it hurts. I was wrong, wrong, wrong." The little cat spoke, actually uttering human words. Is it actually an intelligent demonic creature? Penny said in surprise. She rarely encountered intelligent demonic creatures. Although little Algie had intelligence, it wasn't much. So seeing this talking cat, Penny was still very curious. She even wanted to keep the cat as a pet. No, but Saul shattered her dream. It's a wizard. Huh. Penny knew some wizards could transform into animals, but that was generally short-term transformation or illusion. But the cat before them had already been beaten to this state by Saul, yet still hadn't changed back to original form. Truly amazing. She became even more interested. Saul looked down at the orange cat playing dead under his foot. This is my first time seeing a wizard completely transformed into an animal. I really want to take it back for dissection. No, 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 no. The cat on the ground was so scared its fur stood on end. At this time, more footsteps approached, and the second living person who had been hiding nearby finally appeared. Sorry, sir. We didn't intentionally attack you. It's mainly that dangerous people appear here from time to time, so we need to confirm visitors' identities and purposes. Saul looked up and saw a man with a face full of graying beard walk out from the shadows. Saul's gaze swept across the other's face. Although this man's hair and beard were already graying, the skin on his face looked like that of a middle-aged man, without too much sagging or wrinkles. His gaze then fell on the other's shoulder, seeing an existence like a slime monster huddled on the man's shoulder. The white-bearded man had been watching Saul's line of sight, and when he noticed him looking at his shoulder, the muscles in his back tensed. He can discover my symbiotic sprite. Seeing the wariness of the man across from him, Saul seemingly casually looked away. Then he bent down and picked up the cat under his foot. Attack was a test, feigning injury was a test. May I ask if your testing is finished? Saul casually tossed the cat away. A second-rank wizard still disguising as first-rank magical power fluctuations. Is this your third test? The tossed cat flipped in midair and landed steadily on all fours. But then it slowly straightened its upper body and clasped its hands in front of its chest. Sorry, this place is really too dangerous. We're also acting out of self-preservation. After this dirty orange cat clapped its hands, the dust on its body was cleaned completely, and a red jacket appeared on it. But we can consider this an opportunity to get acquainted. Your strength is formidable, your mental power quite sharp. Among the second-rank wizards I've seen, you're quite powerful. If you don't mind the little misunderstanding just now, let's cooperate. Saul smiled slightly. Cooperate on what? The cat's expression froze, and it looked back at the white-bearded man. Whitebeard took over. Since we've reached this point, we won't hide anything. The dean of Baton Academy has gone mad. This has already spread in small circles. The second-rank wizards who came here are basically all for his door-opening method. Door-opening method. This was the first time Saul had heard of this. The orange cat stared with round eyes. Don't tell me you're just simply passing through. It's spreading among second-rank wizards now that Baton Academy's dean went mad because he tried to open doors but failed. We entered the inner city that Caugust sealed off precisely to obtain their dean's method for pushing open the inner door, right? Saul slightly raised his eyebrows, his pupils contracting, showing a look of surprise while trying to restrain that surprise. Then why do you two want to cooperate with me? If you can't give a convincing reason, I can only consider this the fourth test. The orange cat seemed not to expect Saul to be so difficult, and couldn't help but meow once. The white beard beside him proactively said, Actually, the reason is simple. You probably haven't been to the current Baton Academy yet, right? If you'd been there, you'd know a massive tree with a diameter of over 100 meters has appeared there. Saul's first reaction upon hearing this was disbelief. After all, a giant tree with a diameter of over 100 meters. he would definitely be able to see it from this position. But when he looked toward Baton Academy now, he could only see the academy's walls. Those walls weren't very tall either, less than 3 meters. They couldn't possibly hide a big tree. The orange cat waved its 2 paws frantically. That's not a big tree, it's a big tree stump. It only rises 2 meters above ground level, then it's like it was cut in half by an even more massive axe. The white beard's mouth hidden under thick whiskers curved upward. Yes, it's a broken tree, but what's truly terrifying are actually its roots. Each of those roots has strength approaching that of a true wizard. Even if they can't kill us, they can still prevent us from entering Baton Academy. We too have already tried several times and keep being blocked outside. Now that we've finally met someone of considerable strength like yourself, we naturally want to cooperate. The orange cat jumped up and down. If you still don't believe us, you can go look at Baton Academy yourself first, but I should warn you, once you cross the wall, you'll immediately be attacked by tree roots. No need, Saul said after thinking for a moment. For something that can be easily verified as true or false, you presumably have no need to lie. So if we cooperate, what do we need to do? And what countermeasures do you have for entering Baton Academy to find the door-opening method? This question directly silenced the two across from him. Seeing this, he asked incredulously, "You don't mean to tell me you have no battle plan whatsoever?" The orange cat jumped up. "It's really that there are too many of those tree roots. We've tried other methods too, but they all failed in the end. That tree stump is very likely a third-rank demonic creature. To enter Baton Academy, there's no way to take shortcuts. We can only force our way through. Cat Wizard and I are a bit lacking, but adding you should be enough to get in." Perhaps fearing Saul still wouldn't believe them, the orange cat pulled out a black stone from its jacket pocket. "A recording stone. This contains footage we specifically recorded to review our previous battles. You can examine it. Of course, if you could also find a better attack route, that would be even more perfect." Chapter 723, Cooperation. The recording stone was worn on the orange cat. Because it was constantly running, the footage was quite chaotic. However, with Saul's mental power, he didn't feel confused. On the contrary, because the orange cat frequently changed positions, he could more completely understand the situation inside Baton Academy. Through the recording stone, he also discovered that the orange cat should specialize in earth attribute spells. When attacking, it mainly used its small body as bait to lure enemies over, then cast earth spike and earth trap magic from underground to kill enemies. As for the white-bearded wizard, it was temporarily unclear what magic he specialized in. But he seemed to be using his own hair to attack. Saul saw him directly using the hair on his arms to cut or block attacks from numerous tree roots. Soft body hair turned directly into steel needles on his body. When the steel needles were sparsely arranged, they were sharp weapons. When densely arranged, they were solid shields. Besides this, Saul also paid special attention to the symbiotic sprite on Whitebeard's shoulder. The symbiotic sprite made no movements or signals during Whitebeard's battle. It looked like it couldn't help at all. But if that were really the case, Whitebeard could have the symbiotic sprite hide during battle to avoid interference. The other party keeps the symbiotic sprite around. It should have some purpose. Saul continued observing and finally noticed a clue. Tree roots pierced by Whitebeard all seemed to wither into dead branches. However, the orange cat seemed to intentionally keep this scene out of the recording stone, so Saul only deduced this result by reassembling several scattered frames. Recording stones can't be faked, but they can mislead people. Especially this kind of half-truth is most likely to deceive. They're not necessarily targeting me specifically, but they're definitely the type who habitually hold something back. After watching once, Saul understood and returned the recording stone to the orange cat. Those tree roots are indeed difficult to deal with. However, my specialty magic happens to counter this type of group attack enemy. Really? The orange cat was still somewhat doubtful. We've already shown you our fighting methods. If you're sincere, show us your specialty magic now. Whitebeard beside him tried a different approach to persuade Saul. If we can understand each other's attack patterns, we'll definitely be more successful in battle. Saul naturally understood this point. What he was going to demonstrate wasn't his real specialty magic anyway. Everyone was half and half. He had no burden. Raising both arms, two black blades appeared out of nowhere in his palms. 1 second later, the two blades split into 4, then split into 8. Finally, over 100 black blades appeared around Saul's body. They looked coldly gleaming, but had no killing intent or fluctuations. So scary, the orange cat's eyes widened. Powerful attacks plus extreme stealth, perfect for secret assassinations. Whitebeard beside him also widened his eyes and blurted out, "Soul blades." Saul immediately turned his head. This was the first time since learning this magic from Jasim's remaining knowledge memories that he heard someone call out the magic's true name. "What's your relationship to Jasim?" Whitebeard continued asking. His beard trembled slightly, seemingly very excited. "I met Wizard Jasim a few times. Later, he suddenly taught me this magic, saying he didn't want this magic to disappear forever." The white-bearded man nodded, looking somewhat dejected. "That's his style." "What's your relationship with Wizard Jasim?" "I remember Wizard Jasim should be a judgment wizard of the tribunal," Saul asked in return. "Me, like him, I'm just a cast-off from the tribunal." Whitebeard didn't want to say more beyond this, but his expression became much gentler as he said to Saul, "Since you could gain his recognition, I believe we'll definitely succeed this time." The orange cat beside them jumped up and down, very impatient with the two suddenly reminiscing, and quickly asked, "Does this mean we've reached a cooperation agreement? Do we need to sign a contract scroll? If not, let's go to Baton Academy now." "A contract isn't necessary, but I still need some time to prepare." "Ah," the orange cat was somewhat disappointed. "You look like you're in good condition. What else do you need to prepare?" Whitebeard picked up the orange cat. "You suddenly ask someone to cooperate. It's normal for them to need preparation." He then said to Saul, "How long do you need to prepare? I'm not rushing you, but this matter will definitely attract more wizards wanting to advance to 3rd rank. Once there are too many people, troubles and complications increase." Saul glanced at the sky. "Not too long. Tomorrow at sunrise, let's meet directly at Baton Academy's main gate." "Fine," Whitebeard nodded, then carried the orange cat and turned to leave. After their figures disappeared into the low building ruins, Herman asked Saul in confusion, "Master, what do you need to prepare tonight?" Penny wanted to rub her antennae. "Are you going to set up ambushes at Baton Academy in advance, then catch them both in one net?" "If I wanted to catch them both, would I need a whole night to prepare?" Saul snorted coldly, turned around and walked back. "I haven't finished what I need to do." Penny was still wondering what Saul hadn't finished, but Saul returned to the original houses to continue scavenging. But during the scavenging intervals, Saul would set up some magical formations in several rooms. Some of these formations were spirit-gathering arrays, some were explosive arrays, and others Penny couldn't understand. Can't help it, she was just an unambitious butterfly. As Saul's strength grew stronger, her knowledge reserves were becoming insufficient. However, compared to Herman, she still felt quite superior. "Look, Brother Saul is definitely preparing a big move," Penny whispered to Herman. Busy like this until the sun set and rose again. Saul arrived at Baton Academy's main gate on time. As soon as he reached the entrance, he saw a cat jump down from the gate's horizontal beam. "You're right on time. Where is that white-beard gentleman?" The orange cat meowed with laughter. Meow, you actually call him Whitebeard. Just a temporary designation. Saul had no intention of telling them his name either. Then what do you call me? Orange cat, sir. Meow, I'm not an orange cat, No, wait, I'm not a cat. Saul looked past the orange cat's eyes, thinking, this wizard has been in cat form for a long time. His spiritual body has been polluted. If he can't solve the pollution in time, he'll mutate sooner or later. However, Saul didn't point this out for now. The orange cat seemed completely unaware of his abnormal mental state. Then I'll call you. He couldn't think of any particularly striking features about Saul for a moment. Although Saul looked decent, he seemed too normal. All right, I'll call you Black Blade Wizard. Finally, the orange cat thought of the powerful magic Saul had cast yesterday. How's that? Not bad, right? The orange cat looked quite proud, meowing happily. You still haven't answered my question. Whitebeard is inside preparing formations. Once we go over, we can officially begin the assault. Then let's go. Saul removed his cloak's hood and walked in first. Chapter 724, Plans and Surprises. Whitebeard was just behind the gate. He and the orange cat had already turned this place into their base of operations. But when Saul walked through the gate, the first thing he saw wasn't the white-bearded wizard crouching on the ground, but the dense, gnarled and twisted tree roots behind the gate. These tree roots should have originally stayed underground, but now they were piled up like maze walls throughout the academy's interior. It was as if they had been deliberately pruned by a gardener into this shape. The walls formed by these tree roots were taller than Saul. Only when Saul flew up could he see over the forest-like expanse of root walls to the even more shocking tree stump inside. Just as the orange cat had described, a tree stump that had been cut in half, or rather, cut at the roots, lay flat in the academy's center. The original buildings had all been annihilated and crushed, or pushed to the sides. What Saul found strange was that the tree stump before him should have been exposed to air for several months already. Yet the cross-section of the stump remained fresh, as if it had just been cut. Saul narrowed his eyes. The broken surface of the stump seemed to have countless runes swimming across it. They would sometimes appear on the bark, sometimes sink into the trunk's interior. Magical power was evenly transmitted to the surrounding tree roots, causing the root walls before them to slowly grow taller and larger. Don't think about flying over from above. At this time, Whitebeard, who was crouching on the ground drawing formations, spoke. Both mine and orange cat's magic rely heavily on the ground. If you're in the sky, we have no way to support you. He pointed at the root walls without looking back. Besides, these tree roots can actually grow to very high heights, and even if you could fly higher, it wouldn't help since our target, the giant tree stump, is on the ground. Saul landed back on the ground. Thanks for the reminder. Only then did he observe the formation Whitebeard was drawing on the ground. This small patch of clean ground was almost the last pure land inside the academy. Moreover, this clearing had a magical formation drawn on it that covered almost the entire space. Both Saul and the orange cat could only stand against the walls. Whitebeard was still perfecting the formation's details, making final preparations for the imminent attack. Saul observed the magical formation on the ground for a while. Air cannon. I like that description. Whitebeard finished drawing the last magical rune and looked up. I used to fire cannons a lot, just don't have the chance anymore. He stood up and explained the formation to Saul. Air cannon, just as you described. It gathers nearby air, then shoots it out like a cannon. The longer we entangle with these tree roots, the more passive we become. This formation can use air cannons to open a path closer to the tree stump for us. Once we reach the end of the path opened by the air cannon, we'll use magic to charge forward. which can save us a lot of energy. Whitebeard didn't seem afraid that Saul would steal his techniques, openly displaying his magical formation in front of Saul. How much longer? The orange cat paced back and forth impatiently. Once it's fully daylight, these tree roots will become even more active. Now, Whitebeard stood up. We retreat to the gate. Remember, when you hear the rumbling sound, immediately charge into the gap. The orange cat beside them had already assumed an attack-ready position, while keeping his eyes fixed on the two as he said, "Remember, once we find someone suspected to be Baton's Dean, we must wait for everyone to gather before taking any action. Otherwise, we're just asking for trouble." From the orange cat's tone, Saul got the impression he had already decided that once they found Baton's Dean, they could subdue him. But would the head of a major faction really be so weak? As for whether the other party had mutated, Saul couldn't be certain yet. After all, in Wizard Jonah's memory, the Dean had only activated the inverted tree to sacrifice everyone in order to save Wizard Bate, who had been injured by Shea. However, regardless of the truth, he should enter the Academy's interior now. Presumably, Kelly outside had already finished setting up the 5 auxiliary formations. Bang! Suddenly there was an explosion, as if someone had instantly smashed a large drum. Both the orange cat and Whitebeard beside him charged out immediately. Saul waited a few seconds before following behind them. The massive air cannon instantly shattered the tree root cluster directly ahead. By the time Saul also stepped inside, the tree roots behind him had already resealed the entrance. The three pursued the gap created by the air cannon, running inward. The closer they got to the Academy's center, the denser and thicker the tree roots became. The air cannon's force was gradually weakening, and with the gradually strengthening obstacles, the tunnel's expansion speed began to slow. But they were still several hundred meters from the central tree stump. "Get ready," the orange cat meowed and suddenly leaped sideways. The next second, several branches with extremely sharp tips shot out from the root walls on both sides, stabbing with fierce momentum into where the orange cat had just been. But immediately, an earth spike also rose from underground, finding the tree root's weakest angle and cutting outward, directly counterattacking the branches that had ambushed the orange cat. Large amounts of branches shattered and fell to the ground. Whitebeard on the other side also began dealing with ambush attacks from branches on both sides. His body hair was like steel needles, and when gathered together formed a sharp blade. He must have also cast some magic. Branches swept by the steel needles would turn dark yellow and brittle, finally falling off the root walls by themselves. Saul, who was last, felt wind howling behind him. Clearly, the root walls that had closed behind them also had man-eating branches attacking him. Saul didn't even look back. Dense black blades suddenly appeared behind him. The blades fell like rain, firing silently but tearing apart all the branches trying to ambush him like autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. After the sounds behind him stopped, Saul looked back. He found that the branches extending from the root walls had all been destroyed, but the root walls only had some small, dense holes. And those small holes quickly disappeared as other roots rapidly filled them in. They replenish quickly, even faster than spellcasting speed. What's providing energy to these tree roots? Without needing anyone to answer, Saul immediately thought of the disappeared people in the inner city. The three ran forward rapidly while dealing with attacks from above, below, left, right, front, and back. After losing the air cannon's propulsion in the blank area, advancing again required directly confronting the city wall-like tree roots. At this point, Saul and the orange cat switched positions, with him taking the lead, using sharper black blades to open gaps in the path ahead. Although all three had considerable strength, there were too many branches and root stems around them. Soon their clothing showed damage. Despite numerous difficulties, they were gradually approaching the inverted tree stump. I can see the tree stump. There aren't any of these annoying trees on top. Kai, Whitebeard, throw me over there. Black Blade, you eliminate the aerial attacks for me. This was also the plan the three had formulated. Whitebeard didn't hesitate, grabbed the orange cat's front legs, spun rapidly in the air twice, and threw him out forcefully. Meow! The orange cat cried out angrily, clearly dissatisfied with Whitebeard's throwing method. Saul smiled slightly and immediately waved for the black blades to follow. According to plan, once the orange cat reached the tree stump, he would immediately set up another small air cannon to open a new passage beside the two. This way, Saul and Whitebeard could break through a thin wall and advance a long distance again. After several repetitions, it would be enough for them to break free from the tree roots and climb onto the tree stump's surface. However, plans still couldn't keep up with change. After the orange cat flew out of their line of sight, he suddenly let out a shrill scream. Meow! Whitebeard stared. Don't tell me these tree roots can climb onto the tree stump too. But then they heard the orange cat continue shouting, "There's a ghost." Chapter 725, Night Scene. Due to the unexpected situation with the orange cat, Saul and Whitebeard didn't receive timely air cannon support. The two were temporarily trapped among the tree root walls, unable to advance or retreat. Kate, Whitebeard shouted at the top of his lungs. Whatever you've encountered, fire the air cannon first, or we can't get over to help you. Obviously, Kate was the orange cat's real name. Whitebeard was afraid the orange cat might not understand code names in his panic, so he called out his real name, hopping to get his attention. Whitebeard's words had some effect, but not much. Orange Cat Kate did fire a small air cannon. But the air cannon shot wide, about 20 meters away from the two men, roughly the same distance as from them to the tree stump. Damn it, Whitebeard couldn't help cursing when he saw this. Whitebeard actually had backup plans for this situation, but those plans could only save himself. It wasn't that he was particularly kind and wanted to save Saul, but after finally assembling a well-coordinated team, it would be a real shame to disband like this. Most importantly, who knew how long it would be before they could get this close to the tree stump again? Just as Whitebeard was hesitating whether to use his last resort, Saul suddenly jumped into the air. Immediately, numerous tree roots followed to attack him. Just as Whitebeard was wondering if Saul had given up and wanted to escape, a large number of black blades suddenly appeared around Saul. But this time, the blades were gleaming black, different from their previous dull state. He actually modified Jasim's strongest magic. The black blades shot out rapidly, instantly cutting through all the tree roots, attacking Saul and embedding into nearby root walls, leaving small holes. More black blades were fired toward the tree stump, turning the root walls there into Swiss cheese. But that seemed to be all. In terms of attack power, it didn't seem much stronger than the original soul blades. However, something happened that nearly made Whitebeard tear out his beard in shock. This time, the tree roots cut by the bright black blades actually didn't automatically repair themselves. Not only that, the tree roots seemed to have encountered corrosive liquid. The wounds pierced by the blades kept expanding. The side toward the tree stump was even more exaggerated. Without Whitebeard needing to act, the root walls were corroded into a large hole. Saul landed and looked expressionlessly at the dumbfounded Whitebeard. "This is my trump card. Let's move quickly before the effect wears off." After speaking, Saul immediately charged into the damaged root walls, continuing toward the tree stump. Despite Saul's demonstration, Whitebeard still cautiously observed for 2 seconds before following. He was afraid of being affected by Saul's magic's corrosive effect. To prevent being trapped here, he still chased after him before Saul's figure disappeared. However, after entering the damaged root cluster, he indeed felt somewhat uncomfortable. Though not very serious, it showed how terrifying Saul's recent attack had been. Moreover, this uncomfortable feeling was somewhat familiar, seeming like some kind of pollution, but he couldn't remember where he had felt the same aura. With no time to think further, Whitebeard eliminated the scattered tree roots that appeared and finally reached the tree stump. The tree stump was only 2 meters high, level with Whitebeard's height. He leaped lightly and jumped up. When jumping, two thoughts flashed through his mind. First, the Black Blade Wizard's magic has quite a long duration. We've charged all the way here, and the tree roots show no signs of recovery. Second, why haven't I seen Black Blade and Kate, who should have arrived here first? When Whitebeard's feet landed on the tree stump's fresh, newly cut surface, the scene before him suddenly changed. Illusion. Whitebeard didn't panic, but immediately began observing his surroundings and spreading his mental power, trying to find Saul and Kate who had come up earlier. Now there was no tree stump or densely tangled tree roots around him. Not only that, even the time had changed. When they took action, the sun had just risen above the horizon. At most half an hour had passed by the time he stepped onto the tree stump. But now there was a crescent moon overhead. Time had suddenly shifted from day to night. Under his feet was a clean, neat stone road. On both sides were towering buildings, with a few windows dimly lit while most were dark. If Saul were here, he would recognize this as clearly the night scene of the inner city district before Kaugust's inner city was destroyed. But this night scene was somewhat abnormal. Sometimes black figures would appear in the lit rooms around, but when you looked carefully, they would be gone. HMPH, Whitebeard sneered, using such low-level scare tactics on a second-rank wizard. However, he still cautiously walked to the middle of the road, staying away from the nearby buildings. It wasn't that he was being stubborn. He was actually worried that this eerie scene might hide traps capable of harming him. He wasn't afraid of ghosts. What he meant was he wasn't afraid of fake, harmless ghosts, not powerful second- or third-rank ghosts. There was a streetlight every dozen or so meters on both sides of the road. However, the lighting was dim, only allowing people to barely see the road ahead. Even though Whitebeard was a second-rank wizard with night vision abilities, it didn't work. The entire illusion was sending signals to his brain that he couldn't see clearly. Since I came in, Black Blade Wizard and Kate should also be here. I just don't know if the illusion will prevent us from seeing each other or even make us treat each other as enemies. Don't look for people first. First find the source in this illusion that's affecting my spiritual body. Eliminate the source and naturally escape the illusion. Within these few thoughts, Whitebeard had already made his decision. He didn't stand in place waiting but stepped forward. Since I was facing this direction when I appeared, the illusion's source probably wants me to walk forward too. Following the illusion's guidance, though it might lead to danger, could also help discover flaws more quickly. Whitebeard was confident in his strength and naturally felt that action was better than stillness. Meow. He had barely walked 10 meters when he heard a cat's call. Whitebeard chuckled mockingly. Sure enough, changes are appearing. Meow. Another cat call. The imitation isn't very good. Although Kate looks like a cat, his voice still differs somewhat from a real cat's. Despite having seen through the other's disguise, Whitebeard still walked forward. Let me see who's calling. He continued walking forward following the sound. The streetlight overhead flickered several times, as if the magical device inside was malfunctioning. With each flicker, the light dimmed a little more. After the streetlight flickered for the 4th time, a huge cat shadow suddenly appeared under a streetlight ahead of Whitebeard. Due to the dim lighting, Whitebeard could only vaguely see the outline of the cat ahead. He frowned slightly, feeling there was something strange about that cat's appearance. Trying to imitate Kate's appearance, but it's several sizes larger. And what's with those limbs? Is that cat standing on its tiptoes? The cat's shadow ahead had its back arched high, limbs straight, with only the very tips of its claws touching the ground. As if that cat wasn't standing on the ground, but was hanging at a height where its claw tips just touched the ground. Chapter 726, Ash People. A hanging cat. Whitebeard still didn't feel afraid. He even quickened his pace and continued forward. But when he reached the next streetlight, he unconsciously slowed down. At this distance, he finally saw clearly the appearance of the huge, strangely moving cat before him. It wasn't actually a cat, but a complete cat pelt. This pelt was draped over a black-gray human figure. The pelt's limbs hung down to touch the ground. Because the shadow beneath was also black, Whitebeard hadn't noticed its presence from a distance. "Who's there?" Whitebeard continued forward, but his steps became much more cautious. He carefully probed the black figure wearing cat skin with his mental power. The latter was abnormally sensitive. The instant Whitebeard's mental power made contact, it jerked its head around. Its face was hidden under the flat cat face, with only a chin vaguely visible. The chin was also black, as if a person had lived in coal ash for a year. A person, no, a vengeful spirit. Although Whitebeard didn't retreat, he felt somewhat uneasy. When his mental power swept over just now, the first feedback was that the other party was human. But his eyes told him that the figure in cat skin across from him couldn't possibly be human. Should he trust his mental power's feedback or his eyes? Unfortunately, in the wizard world, neither of these things was always reliable. The streetlight overhead flickered again. When the flickering stopped, the world before him became even dimmer. Whitebeard suddenly felt cold, as if countless mouths were blowing air at him. Thinking this, he noticed his beard swaying gently in his peripheral vision. His heartbeat grew faster. He tried to calm himself down. "My mind is clearly being affected. I'm so nervous now it doesn't feel like myself." The catskin person, stimulated by Whitebeard, continued twisting its head to look at him, the angle far exceeding what a normal person's neck could bear. Whitebeard should have launched an attack against this eerie figure, but his magical power just wouldn't circulate, as if his brain still had reason but his body and spiritual body had gone on strike. He looked up at the crescent moon above the streetlight, seeming to want to temporarily shift his attention from the catskin person to restabilize his spiritual body. However, when he saw the moon in the sky, the fear in his heart became even stronger. That curved crescent moon had somehow become thinner, and its arc was somewhat strange. The crescent's arc was somewhat flattened, not like a moon but like an eye squinted in laughter. The moon has problems too. Could this illusion have two sources? That's not impossible. Whitebeard spoke his thoughts aloud as if this could release some fear. Huff, worthy of Baton Academy. Even though it's desolate, it can still create such a large illusion. In this situation, the illusion's sources might be more than two. The moon was overhead, currently untouchable. Whitebeard forced himself to look at the catskin person across from him again. This illusion releases fearful aura, making people uncontrollably afraid. He grabbed a handful of his beard. The sharp pain made him somewhat clearer, but that trembling from the heart quickly influenced his brain again. "Can't escape." Whitebeard lifted his foot and continued forward. "The more you escape, the more afraid you become. Understanding the unknown is the only way to defeat the unknown." Although walking slowly, this time he didn't stop. He came all the way to the catskin person. The black shadow across from him didn't move, just gradually raised its head as Whitebeard approached, quietly watching him. Dangers that haven't happened are the most frightening. Whitebeard seemed to gradually regain his courage. He suddenly struck. The hair on the back of his hand suddenly lengthened, wrapping around his original arm and forming a spiral cone at his fingertips. A human hand immediately became a massive claw. Whitebeard's arm swept like wind, the claw directly grabbing the cat-skin person's pelt, trying to tear off this inferior disguise. However, when he grabbed the cat's skin, the black figure underneath was also lifted along with it. That cat's skin seemed glued to the figure. Meow! Whitebeard's action finally angered the quiet cat-skin person. It waved its arms, letting out sharp cat cries. Those movements, those sounds, were just like a truly enraged cat. With the cat cries, the streetlight overhead became even dimmer, almost as if extinguished. Whitebeard's heart trembled, but his hands dared not stop. His other hand, wrapped into a claw, viciously clawed at the black shadow figure under the cat's skin. The black claw met slight resistance, but still pierced the other's body. Viciously clenching his 5 fingers, Whitebeard heard a soft pop. The feeling in his hand was like tearing open a sandbag. The scene before him further confirmed Whitebeard's guess. The cat-skin person, whose chest and abdomen had been almost hollowed out by his claw, trembled violently, then powerlessly lowered its head, as if truly killed. But soon, this black figure deflated like an emptied sandbag. Finally, even the human skin turned to black powder, leaving only a person-sized cat pelt still gripped in Whitebeard's hand. HMPH, Illusion Confusion Technique. Having successfully killed the cat-skin person, Whitebeard felt much more comfortable, even experiencing a sense of exhaustion from just breaking free from fear. The streetlight grew dimmer. This streetlight has problems too, is the confusion technique that made me afraid coming from here. Whitebeard looked up, but the streetlight overhead hadn't undergone strange changes like the moon. It seemed like the streetlight was simply dimming. Just as he was about to withdraw his gaze and continue forward, his movements suddenly stiffened. Beside the streetlight, or rather, everywhere except around the streetlight, densely packed black-gray figures stood. These black-gray figures had no features and appeared taller than the streetlight. They bent over like this, standing outside the extremely dim conical light circle formed by the lamp, quietly watching Whitebeard. Just like that cat-skin person. Whitebeard only met these eyeless figures' gaze for 1 second before experiencing splitting headaches, feeling as heavy as if 20 lead blocks had been stuffed inside him. He directly crouched down, holding his head. The cat's skin, originally in his hand, also dropped limply to the ground. Along with the headache came intense fear. Even though Whitebeard lowered his head and closed his eyes, he could still feel countless gazes falling on him. He panted heavily. The fear was like ants, drilling into his flesh through his skin's pores. In such a difficult moment, Whitebeard actually laughed. Worthy of the inverted tree. If you evolved completely, you'd definitely become an existence comparable to third rank. Whitebeard's hands holding his head slowly moved down to his cheeks' thick whiskers. His fingers reached into the whiskers, slowly clenching to grab large handfuls of white long whiskers. Then, he forcefully tore them apart to both sides. Rip, rip. Hair-raising sounds of flesh separating arose. Under Whitebeard's torn chin skin, another highly rotted face was revealed. As expected, mental power battles still need mental power to resist. Despite the pain making him gasp, the corners of Whitebeard's mouth still curved upward. This is a scar left by elves. I want to see whether the pollution left by elves is stronger, or whether you ash people controlled by the inverted tree have more terrifying mental pollution. RIP. Chapter 727, Surprise. The instant Saul jumped onto the tree stump, he discovered he had been forcibly transferred to another space. He looked around and saw towering buildings and hurried pedestrians. Every person looked extremely tired. The sun blazed overhead, making it impossible to open one's eyes. The surrounding sounds were chaotic and annoying. Illusion, this was Saul's first reaction. No, this should be the inverted tree. Benches were placed on both sides of the road, but no one was sitting and resting. Everyone was busy as if they had springs wound up behind their backs. Saul looked around while walking to sit on a bench. He clasped his hands together and propped up his chin. The inverted tree can replicate a certain area of the world, but for the normal world, it's inverted. Saul closed his eyes, his spiritual body trembling slightly, immediately sensing the discordant gravity on his body. However, Saul didn't immediately dispel this discord, but let himself remain in this inverted city. Last time I came here, it was empty. Now it's become so lively. It seems all the people from the inner city have been gathered here. Currently, everyone on the street was walking hurriedly. Only Saul sat alone, extreme motion and extreme stillness forming a sharp contrast. Saul seemed to be just sitting in place, but was actually constantly observing every passerby. They looked no different from normal people. Even their expressions were very vivid. Some were worried, some anxious, some joyful. Like a real world. But after observing for a while, Saul discovered the scene before him was actually repeating. For example, a brown-haired man who had hurriedly walked past him 10 minutes ago passed by him again with the same movements and expression. Saul clearly remembered the appearance of every person who walked past him. Each person walked at different speeds, so the frequency of their reappearance varied. When 36 minutes had passed, the last person also appeared before Saul again. This time, Saul didn't let him pass but stood up and blocked him. The blocked man looked up in confusion, didn't speak, just stared at Saul. As this man was stopped, the others seemed to have their clockwork triggered, gradually stopping one by one. They stopped near Saul and, like the first man who was stopped, looked at Saul in bewilderment. But no matter how many people gathered around, not one spoke. Extreme motion completely became extreme stillness in a short time, creating an eerily atmospheric scene. Let me see where the connection between you lies. Saul broke the silence, smiling at the crowd while slowly narrowing his eyes. Semi-transparent threads extended from his body. These threads didn't touch the people before him, but constantly stirred in the transparent air around them. No fate lines. Saul's smile slowly disappeared. Like Wizard Jonah outside, they're all dead. Dead people didn't necessarily lack fate lines. If they could become relatively stable wraiths or even powerful evil spirits, fate lines would appear. But compared to living people, they would be intermittent. Only the 4 consciousness bodies Saul kept had fate lines similar to living people. You're not living people and have no autonomous consciousness. You're the same pollution that appeared in Kaugus City, the same as those ash people. Saul withdrew his fate lines. Back then in Kaugus City, I saw many people who seemed to turn into monsters in an instant, and they all had semi-transparent threads above their heads. At the time, Saul didn't know what these threads were and thought they were puppet strings for manipulation. After successfully developing the fate lines within himself, he understood those should be fate lines forcibly drawn out from the polluted. Saul hadn't studied what would happen when fate lines were extracted and controlled by others. But now, these people before him might be one answer. Dead people without fate lines had become puppets randomly arranged and controlled inside the inverted tree. Like the most ordinary NPCs in games, without even lines, just acting according to predetermined settings. When their predetermined actions were interrupted, they would fall into confusion. Saul suddenly raised his left hand. Snap! He snapped his fingers. A powerful mental wave spread outward with the sound. like spring wind rippling a lake's surface. Every person staying near Saul undulated like lake water, their bodies twisting like waves. Banged, banged, banged. From inside out, these twisted people's skin burst like balloons, scattering into gray smoke. These gray mists seemed to gather and disperse, barely maintaining human shapes. But after becoming this ghostly appearance, transparent threads gradually emerged above their heads. Saul had just completely shattered the power imprisoning these undead and torn away their disguises. Sure enough, they were ash people he had seen before. As expected, the pollution inside Kaugus back then was actually created by the inverted tree itself. At that time, it was only affecting ordinary people in small areas, but now it's brazenly dragged the entire inner city in. What's the purpose of doing this? Saul flicked the ash person closest to him, who immediately turned to dust and scattered on the ground. Scattered, so fragile, the inverted tree can pull so many people's souls in but can't maintain their strength. Saul suddenly laughed as if discovering someone's secret. It seems Wizard Jonah's words weren't completely wrong. The inverted tree's condition indeed has problems, and these problems were very likely caused by Bait, the Dean, and Shea. Shea, this paranoiac, really did something big. The surrounding light suddenly dimmed. Saul was startled by the alternating brightness and darkness and realized the surroundings had somehow changed from day to night. The ash people who had surrounded him were also gone. Because I discovered something, I was transferred to this place. He observed the surroundings again. Overhead was a full moon. On both sides stood towering buildings. But these buildings were somewhat too dense, with almost no gaps between them. They formed a circle, surrounding Saul in a small clearing, as if to imprison him in a cage. To Saul's left was a streetlight emitting dim light. Unlike the lively daytime, this night scene was very quiet, with only occasional vague footstep sounds. Like someone barefoot, tiptoeing on stone pavement. In the footsteps, one could hear the sound of flesh sticking to stone. A trace of fear spread from the deepest part of his mind to his forehead. The streetlight overhead crackled, the light flickered several times, then became even dimmer like aging equipment. Saul looked up and saw the full moon had become a crescent. In the darkness behind the streetlight, where the light couldn't reach, vaguely human-like but 5 to 6 meters tall giant shadows swayed. So many, Saul blurted out, this is truly a surprising discovery. He no longer observed the surroundings or the moon overhead that had suddenly become round again. Saul pulled up his cloak, wrapping himself from head to toe. 2 seconds later, this cloaked figure suddenly shrank a size. From the gap where the cloak met the ground, gray semi-transparent tentacles slowly extended. Chapter 728, The Cat's Gratitude. Orange Cat Kate ran wildly on the ground with 4 legs, just like a real cat. He cried out miserably, meow meow, tears rolling down his furry face. I hate ghosts, I hate ghosts. The orange cat, who had once had a special encounter with ghosts, desperately fled from the shadows behind him. If he still had his original strong male body, he might have been able to suppress his fear, but now his cat instincts forced him to be completely overwhelmed by the fear growing in his heart, only wanting to escape this place as quickly as possible. The surroundings grew darker and darker. He passed one streetlight after another, but still couldn't run out of this district. The crescent moon ahead seemed to guide his path forward while also mocking his cowardice. What is this place? Why can't I get out? The intelligence was wrong, completely wrong. Such a terrifying place definitely can't be a space created by a second-rank wizard's mutation. At this moment, Kate deeply regretted agreeing to Whitebeard's request to come here together, seeking the method to push open the inner door. Even if he couldn't become a powerful third-rank wizard, he could still be a free second-rank wizard. Even if he couldn't turn back into a human, he could still be a living cat. This road might not lead to escape. I must find other places to get out. Anomalies, anomalies. The most abnormal place might also be the exit to escape from here. Kate widened his cat eyes, pupils dilated to the same size as his eyes. Using his cat's night vision enhancement, he looked left and right. Ahead was an endless road, behind were inescapable shadows. Kate considered that perhaps he could enter the buildings on both sides. But when he finally managed to see the surrounding scenery clearly, he discovered in horror that after running for so long, the buildings around him hadn't changed at all. Yet when he first observed, the buildings on both sides of the road had always been of different heights, staggered and orderly. There hadn't been completely identical, repeating street scenes. But now he discovered that after running for so long, it was as if he hadn't moved at all. He remembered that about 10 meters ahead on his left side, there was a uniquely shaped building, and now this building was exactly 10 meters ahead on his left. Exactly the same position as before Kate started running. Could it be that the roads here are moving backward, or has my sanity already become problematic? Then the ghost behind me. Kate's 4 cat paws were immediately nailed in place, all his cat fur standing on end, the whole cat becoming like a spiky ball. He wanted to look back to see if there was still a ghost behind him, but he didn't dare move or turn around. Because he was afraid that once he turned around, that terrifying ghost would be right behind him. But if he didn't look, didn't turn around, didn't confirm, this fear would stick to his back like a stubborn plaster that could never be shaken off. Kate could only prick up his cat ears, first trying to listen for sounds behind him. He heard a rushing wind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As if a huge cloak was being blown by the wind. And this sound was getting closer and closer, about to reach his back and brush against the fur on his back. Meow. Kate's whole body shuddered. He no longer dared to look back, but knowing that running forward was futile, he randomly chose a direction and ran toward the buildings on either side. After just 2 steps, he suddenly found his feet weren't touching the ground. After instinctively kicking his legs in the air a few times, he realized he had been lifted more than a meter into the air. Found you, Wizard Kate. The newcomer. Kate immediately turned around excitedly. But when he turned to see who was holding his scruff, his cat face twisted in terror. The one holding him and speaking in Black Blade Wizard's voice was actually a skeleton. This skeleton was completely black with no flesh on its bones. In the empty eye sockets of its skull, gray flames seemed to burn. Only the left hand that wasn't gripping Kate was white, wrapped in a transparent, skin-like medium. Meow-ow. The orange cat cried even more miserably, desperately kicking with all 4 limbs, trying to escape from the black skeleton's grasp. But the struggling orange cat Kate didn't notice that what was truly terrifying wasn't the black skeleton in front of him, but the semi-transparent tentacles extending from under his wizard robes. Most of those tentacles extended behind Saul, wrapping around every streetlight he passed. Only 2 tentacles seemed to extend forward curiously, scraping against Kate's little paw pads that reached toward them. Looking at the orange cat panicking almost to collapse, Saul was somewhat puzzled. The other party was a second-rank wizard after all, even though he'd become a cat, but he shouldn't be this afraid just from seeing a skeleton, right? Seeing that the other was about to be scared into collapse and mutation, his spiritual body becoming increasingly unstable, Saul had to retract most of his tentacles and regrow flesh on his face, restoring his appearance. Wizard Kate, if you can't calm down, I can help you. As Saul spoke, a black blade appeared at his left fingertip. Black Blade, wizard. The orange cat was forced to look back again, After seeing Saul's appearance clearly, he finally gradually calmed down. Of course, what really confirmed Saul's identity for him was the mental power that escaped when Saul cast magic. Kate was abnormally sensitive to mental power in his current state. Seeing the orange cat in his hands finally stop struggling, Saul put Kate back on the ground. Wizard Kate, a word of advice: solve the problem of being trapped in cat form as soon as possible, or your spiritual body will collapse sooner or later. Kate didn't respond to Saul's advice. After being put on the ground, he secretly glanced at Saul while muttering, "Didn't turn into a shadow, didn't turn into a shadow." Saul knew Kate must have encountered certain people or things in the inverted tree that had all turned into ash people. It had scared this cat quite badly. "Wizard Kate, I have to say, this place really counters you." Kate originally wanted to be stubborn, but thinking of his recent performance that Saul had witnessed, he could only nod listlessly. "Yes, my nerves are very sensitive in this state, and this place has special effects that stir up fear from the bottom of people's hearts, so I—" He ultimately couldn't bring himself to say something like, "was too scared." But from another angle, this characteristic of yours isn't bad either. "How is it not bad?" Orange Cat Kate almost meowed again to express his indignation. Saul crossed his arms and looked around at the surrounding high-rises. These buildings looked like three-dimensional structures, but after staring for a long time, there was a vague feeling that everything was drawn on paper. Saul looked back at the obviously unhappy Orange Cat Kate and smiled warmly. "Of course, it's the monster-attracting attribute." Kate's whole body stiffened, almost letting out another meow. What are you going to do?" "I saved you, so you should be grateful, right? Ever heard of a cat's gratitude?" Chapter 729, Saul the Merchant. Kate had never heard of a cat's gratitude, but now he witnessed it. This guy seemed to have no emotion called fear in the darkness. He held the cat and walked on a road with no visible end, while black shadows occasionally appeared in the surrounding high-rises, gazing at the man and cat. Despite being carried by Saul, Kate still felt waves of fear. He curled up his limbs, eyes constantly looking left and right, as if completely forgetting he was a wizard. What he hated most was that every time Saul passed a streetlight, he would stop and wait, using Orange Cat Kate's sensitivity to fear to gather those shadows hiding in the dark. Black shadows would quickly gather beside the streetlights, making the already dim lights even darker. When these shadows gathered to a certain degree, Saul would use a special method to shatter the tall, thin shadows into piles of powder. Kate didn't know how Saul resisted the terrifying pressure created by these shadows. He couldn't be using his soul body to tough it out, could he? After passing the third streetlight, Kate finally couldn't help but speak tremblingly. "Black Blade Wizard, are you trying to clear the enemies here this way? But I think this approach won't work." The Orange Cat quickly glanced at the nearby high-rises. The fear these buildings brought him hadn't lessened one bit despite Saul killing some shadows. "I think these shadows should be attachments to this place. Breaking them won't affect this place." "Actually, I'm not breaking these shadows to destroy this place." Saul took 2 more steps forward, then stopped. "Haven't you felt that there's always a gaze watching us?" The Orange Cat stiffly straightened his front paws. "Of course there is, always has been. Since I came in, these shadows have been watching me. By the streetlights in the rooms and that moon in the sky. How is that a moon? It's clearly the most terrifying eye here." Saul suddenly interrupted Kate. "You're right." Kate was first confused, then emphasized, "right," instead of wasting effort like this. But Saul looked up at the moon overhead. "After coming in, I've constantly felt a sense of being watched. That gaze is different from all other existences here, very special, because it's very rational." Rational, Kate couldn't quite understand. It's normal you don't know, since you don't know where this really is. What state we're actually in. You know. Saul looked up, his gaze tightly locked on the moon overhead. The moon had become full again, as if also meeting Saul's gaze. Saul said loudly, "This is actually the inverted tree's replication of Kaugust's inner city. But there's always been an existence here that doesn't belong to Kaugust City, never discovered. It exists so blatantly that I never considered it might not be a product of the inverted tree." Under Saul's gaze, the moon overhead gradually curved. "Right, Mr. Moon." Just as Saul finished speaking, the moon in the sky fell at free fall speed. That's not a moon." Kate finally gained freedom, immediately jumped down from Saul's hands, and ran 7 or 8 steps backward before stopping to look at the sky. "What's strange about that?" The moon landed directly in front of Saul, floating about a meter above the ground. Up close, you could see this moon was actually just a light sphere shell. But the shell suddenly grew 2 eyes and a mouth, immediately complaining about the orange cat. "Is the moon you see really a moon? Just because you look like a fat cat, are you really a cat? Do you think everything around you is an illusion?" Kate was stunned by the moon's retorts. Although he wanted to say he wasn't fat, he had no chance to speak. Seeing the orange cat had no response, the moon seemed to think he posed no threat and looked at Saul again. "I saw you the moment you came in. I knew you were no good. You once pretended to be honest and fooled everyone, even me. Damn it, trusting strangers really comes with a price." Saul raised his eyebrows. He suddenly knew who this moon was. "Wizard Shea." "No need to pretend. If you didn't know who I was, would you deliberately display your strength in front of me to lure me out?" Shea was having another episode. Always thinking the worst of others. However, it might be precisely this personality that made him an anomaly among the spirits absorbed by the inverted tree. "Think whatever you want." Saul was too lazy to explain. "I originally came here for something, but the inverted tree's condition has obviously changed. So I need to figure out one thing. What's the state of this tree now? Who exactly is this tree's master?" Kate, who had been confused by Shea's questions, couldn't help but turn his gaze to Saul. "What kind of person is this Black Blade wizard? He seems to know more than W. Lighter." A glint of coldness flashed through the orange cat's big innocent eyes, then disappeared instantly, returning to a dazed state. He tried to minimize his presence while pricking up his ears to listen to their conversation. "HMPH, why should I tell you?" Shea, who had become the moon, snorted coldly. "Are you also coveting the inverted tree? That's not something you can aspire to." Saul crossed his arms and mocked back. "Why do you need to care about these things? Regardless of who it is, it couldn't possibly be you, just a spirit that became a puppet long ago." The moon's eyes suddenly narrowed. "Are you trying to provoke me? Don't waste your effort. Just know that without my help, you'll be forever trapped in the inverted city, forever and ever, until you also become cocoons of the inverted tree." The moon viciously threatened Saul and Kate. "That won't trouble you." Saul suddenly stepped forward and reached out to touch the moon. The moon quickly rose, reaching streetlight height in the blink of an eye. But Saul's speed wasn't slow either. Moreover, the gray semi-transparent tentacles he suddenly swung were even faster. Directly intercepting the moon mid-flight and quickly coiling back, tying a knot around it. Seeing Saul act, Shea seemed to have forgotten he had actively fallen from the sky himself. "You liar, you really want to kill me." Having mixed in the inverted tree for years, Shea was angry but not panicked. While cursing, he prepared to change his form and escape from the knot Saul had created. So the round moon became a crescent in the blink of an eye. But Shea discovered that the rope binding him had shrunk along with him. The tentacles binding him had rows of suckers firmly attached to the moon's surface. Saul unhurriedly pulled back his tentacles, watching Shea try but fail to break free. Although your consciousness is still independent, you've obviously been affected by the inverted tree. If you say that without you, we might not be able to leave this inverted city, then without me, you'll gradually lose yourself in disguise. Shea's struggling movements obviously slowed down. Clearly, he understood this point too, or he wouldn't have been so eager to reveal himself before Saul. Compared to Saul being trapped in the inverted city, he, Shea, was the one desperate to escape. Shea became a full moon again. What exactly do you want to do? Saul smiled. Let's make a deal. I'll help treat you and you help me get the inverted tree's seed, if it hasn't rotted yet. Chapter 730, Bait's Sacrifice. Although Shea stopped struggling, he didn't trust Saul. You treat me. Do you know what happened to me? Do you think that by claiming to treat me and temporarily helping suppress the pollution, you can make me work for you? Having stayed in place too long, the streetlights in front of and behind Saul dimmed again. The shadows made Saul's expression unclear. But his voice was exceptionally clear. You might not know that in the years after leaving Caugust, I've been working part-time as a doctor. I'm quite capable when it comes to treating pollution. Saul's voice was very natural and confident. Besides, even if I don't know what happened to you, you can tell me, can't you? Even the most powerful doctor needs to learn about the cause and symptoms from the patient before treatment. If you want to escape your current predicament, cooperate obediently with my treatment. The suddenly harsh tone combined with mental pressure made both the moon in front and the orange cat behind shrink back. Startled by Saul's suddenly intensified pressure, Shea trembled as he spoke. You really were hiding your strength. What level are you now? What exactly are you plotting? Trading with Shea was really troublesome. He always treated Saul like a crooked merchant, suspecting his motives. Though Saul was indeed a crooked merchant. Now the crooked merchant's patience was exhausted. He pressed the moon to the ground and rubbed it. Cut the nonsense. I'm just asking you, treat or not treat. Treat, treat. Shea's survival instinct finally overcame his paranoia as he said repeatedly. Treat, treat, meow. Even Kate behind them mechanically repeated. Hearing the cat cry, Saul looked back to see Kate was already 20 meters away. Don't run around. Yes, yes. The orange cat quickly moved his short legs and ran to Saul's side, behaving extremely obediently. Saul looked back at Shea, who had also become well-behaved, took a deep breath and let go. He thought, is my way of dealing with people too gentle? Is it because I advance too quickly and don't interact with other factions, so I haven't been able to change my original mindset? Seeing Saul finally let go, Shea quickly caught his breath and said, It's not safe here. Let's go somewhere else to start. After speaking, the moon Shea had transformed into suddenly brightened, white light, enveloping Saul and Kate's figures. When the white light disappeared, the three had arrived in a house. Saul looked around and immediately remembered. This was the villa where Shea had lived during his lifetime. He still remembered that the villa's basement hid a spatial transmission formation. How did you do that? Kate rubbed the ground with his cat paws, feeling real tactile feedback from his paw pads. If you could live here for over a year, you could do it too. Facing the orange cat, Shea couldn't help but use a mocking tone. But when he turned to see Saul, his momentum disappeared. The moon-like outer light shell slowly cracked open, revealing the wizard inside. In this villa, Shea had returned to human form. But this appearance wasn't completely the same as his original self. The Shea before them was bare-chested, with tender green branches sprouting from his forehead, cheeks, neck, and arms. As if a seed had taken root in his body and cruelly broken through his organs and skin to sprout. He looked down at the branches on his body and sighed. You're right. If no one helps me escape this predicament, I'll be assimilated by this environment and become Bait's puppet completely. Bait, Saul wasn't surprised to hear this name. Yes, Bait. To understand the cause of the pollution on me, you must know about Bait, know about the inverted tree. Actually, the real controller of Baton Academy isn't the dean but Wizard Bait, who seems to be only first rank. She's actually the previous dean of Baton Academy, the former third-rank wizard of Baton Academy. Crack, the orange cat's jaw dislocated. Saul frowned but didn't interrupt Shea. Then Shea retold what happened at Baton Academy from his perspective. Bait had once been the powerful third-rank wizard who led Baton Academy to defeat the Kema Empire's army. But she was actually also a failure. Being forced to leave the borderland with the Academy was actually because she failed to compete with Clark for territory and was driven out. At the same time, due to serious injuries from fighting Clark, after Bait barely managed to establish a foothold for Baton Academy by moving mountains and burying people to create the Hanging Hands Valley Massacre, she died from her severe injuries. However, as a third-rank wizard, Bait had already prepared for resurrection. She used her corpse to nourish the inverted tree and gradually cultivated it into a massive demonic creature capable of covering an entire city. Bait then used the inverted tree's branches and resin, mixed with her blood, to create a vessel that allowed her to live like a human. She harbored her soul in the inverted tree's inverted space, using the souls and special energy absorbed by the inverted tree to maintain her soul's daily consumption and ensure her soul wouldn't be easily polluted. Through this, Bait had indirectly completed the task of resurrection. But resurrection was, after all, an advanced topic for third-rank wizards. Bait, who possessed a new body and was preparing to quickly recover her strength, soon noticed something amiss. The increasingly powerful inverted tree had actually begun competing with Bait for nutrition. What troubled Bait most was that she couldn't really compete with the inverted tree. If she lost the competition, without replenishment she would either disappear or become polluted due to excessive weakness. If she won, the inverted tree would starve to death, and as a soul dependent on it, she would naturally lose her habitat. After deliberating for a day and night, Bait finally decided, since there wasn't enough nutrition, they should eat more. From that day on, Baton Academy, which hadn't yet established a firm foothold, began desperately expanding enrollment. As long as incoming students had magical aptitude, regardless of their talent level, they accepted everyone. But wizard apprentices were limited in number, so Baton Academy began changing strategy, mainly recruiting ordinary people to settle in Kaugus City, using quantity to ensure quality. The inverted tree would hide underground, enjoying the soul fragments collectively provided by everyone above ground. Despite so many people sharing the burden, some still collapsed and died under the inverted tree's day-after-day exploitation. Their souls, having been mostly absorbed already, could only become ash-like existences after death, not even qualifying as spirits. As Kaugus City grew larger and residential buildings grew taller, even dozens or hundreds of deaths here wouldn't be conspicuous. But things weren't perfectly resolved. As the inverted tree grew stronger, its appetite also grew larger. If Bait wanted to maintain her spirit's stability, she had to continue feeding the inverted tree, then helplessly watch it continue growing stronger. Everything would fall into a vicious cycle. Before things developed to an unsolvable point, Bait made another decision. She would abandon her original Earth attribute locator choice and transform the inverted tree into her new locator, merging the two so she'd never again worry about competing for nutrition, while better controlling the inverted tree. For this decision, Bait would sacrifice everyone in the entire city. Chapter 731. Why not be a little bolder? When Bait prepared to sacrifice everyone in Kaugus City, She had already made the decision to flee the western region with her trusted followers. Since she wouldn't be staying here anymore, she naturally didn't care what impact this sacrifice would have on the entire western region of the continent. However, after she lured more and more people over, a small accident, a tiny oversight, caused the entire sacrifice to come to a halt. This small accident was naturally the wizard Shea, who had long been captured by Bait and whose spirit body was manipulated by the inverted tree. After listening to Shea's account, Saul looked up and down at the spirit body before him. How did you manage to do that? That's my secret weapon, I can't tell you. Saul didn't press him. Fine, you're not my main objective anyway, but there's one thing you must tell me, what caused your current state? Shea became agitated, as if introducing his own affliction to others made him very uncomfortable. However, considering his situation, he quickly provided an answer. After my soul was absorbed into the inverted tree, although I barely managed to maintain independent consciousness, many of my actions had to follow Bait's commands. I've always been careful not to expose myself, only occasionally doing my own things to maintain my sense of self. Later, when I realized that the entire inverted tree was actually absorbing the souls of the city's residents, I knew I had to find a way to leave this place. As long as I remained trapped here, I would eventually become nourishment for Bait and the inverted tree, just like those absorbed souls. So I prepared for several months. When Bait once again ran to the very center of the inverted tree, I deliberately took away a key node from her formation. Taking advantage of her being trapped due to the formation's backlash, I immediately escaped. You're really bold. Kate extended her cat claws toward Shea. Even though Bait is now just a spirit body, she was once a powerful third-rank wizard. You casually disrupted the formation and actually managed to trap her. Saul watched as Shea pursed his lips without responding, knowing there were still secrets involved. And then Saul asked. Only then did Shea skip over the most crucial part. Afterward, to prevent me from escaping, Bait actually activated her sacrifice early, directly pulling everyone in the inner city in to help stabilize her spiritual body. So now the entire inner city has turned to ash. Saul crossed his arms. Souls extracted, bodies turned to ash. Pretty much, Shea said. Because she wasn't ready yet but absorbed a large number of spirit bodies, she's now trapped and can't come out to catch me. But once she can control herself, she'll definitely come looking for me and tear me to shreds. Shea's expression was grave, clearly fearful of Bait's threat. Then why can't you leave the inverted tree now? Since you made so many preparations, you must know how to leave, right? Of course I know, but I won't tell you until you help me remove my restraints. Didn't I already say? I'll help you with treatment and you'll help me find the seed. The restraints on you are also a kind of illness for you, so naturally I'll help treat that too. Seeing Shea's expression of temptation mixed with wariness, Saul added fuel to the fire. However, since you're going to help me get the inverted tree's seed anyway, why don't we set our sights a little bigger during the operation? Shea immediately became suspicious of Saul's intentions. What are you trying to do? Don't think about deceiving me. I can kick you all out of here at any time. Saul chuckled lightly, completely unconcerned by Shea's threat, and continued his temptation. Anyway, you only have your spirit body left now, which is equivalent to being dead. Even if you escape the inverted tree, you'll just be barely surviving. Why not go find Bait and while she's trapped, directly steal her inverted tree? How about it? Crack! Kate once again heard the sound of his cat jaw dropping to the floor. Kate turned his head and stared at Saul in a daze. Just moments ago, he had thought Shea was a fool for daring to scheme against a third-rank wizard. Now Saul seemed like a madman in his eyes. You're insane, Shea directly voiced Kate's thoughts. You want to get the method to escape, then trick me into going to my death. I can wait until you retrieve the inverted tree's seed before leaving. Shea still didn't believe him. Then you just want to do something bad while I'm stealing the inverted tree's seed. Saul's heart jumped, thinking, this guy's guess is pretty accurate. However, his expression remained unchanged. Then let me ask you, will you take me to the core of the inverted tree? Shea was stunned and immediately shook his head. Impossible. Saul spread his hands. Then how do you think I could do anything bad? Without waiting for Shea to think, Saul continued, raising the stakes. I can help you with treatment right now. Can't you kick us out at any time? After I finish the treatment, you can go help me get the seed. How about it? Shea still hesitated. You be so kind as to help me with treatment first. The spirit body is your own. Can't you tell whether it's good or bad? Shea was still hesitating. Saul frowned. Was this indecisive, danger-fearing Shea really the right choice? Suddenly, the entire house shook violently, and the decorations on the table and hanging from the ceiling shattered all over the floor. Several thick tree branches broke through the walls, winding upward, quickly wrapping around the walls of the entire room. Meow, what is this? How did tree roots get here? Kate immediately ran to the center of the room. A flash of panic crossed Shea's face, but he didn't surrender or resist. Instead, he once again transformed into a ball of light, and white radiance once more engulfed Saul and Kate. When the light faded, Saul found they had arrived at another place. He hadn't been here before. It must be another of Shea's secret bases. You really don't have much time left. Saul was actually somewhat grateful for the tree roots that had just appeared. Are you willing to make this deal or not? Don't waste other people's time. Shea knew Saul was right. After all, he was Bates' puppet. Even if he had temporarily broken free from her control, he would inevitably be controlled by her again once Bates' condition recovered. Under the mixture of tension and fear, Saul's proposal, which he had just regarded as a terrible threat, gradually became a deadly temptation. If we could steal the inverted tree, Shea seemed to be trembling all over, whether from fear or excitement. If I could become the master of the inverted tree, I wouldn't need to run away. Saul nodded with satisfaction. Not only would you not need to run away, but you'd also have hope of resurrection. Shea suddenly looked up at Saul. You're a very talented wizard. If Bate can do it, can't you do it too? Shea's breathing immediately became heavy, even though he no longer needed to breathe. Fine. Finally, Shea agreed to Saul's devil-like proposal. Help me with treatment right now. I'm afraid those tree roots will find us before long. This is a sign that Bate is gradually recovering. We don't have much time. Chapter 732, Go Die First. The white-bearded wizard lay collapsed beneath a ruined building, his back against the broken walls, mentally exhausted to the point where he could barely stay conscious. At this moment, there was still a very deep, very terrifying wound on his chin. It looked like a fish mouth growing on his jaw. The skin had split open and drooped down, revealing what appeared to be rotting white flesh inside the wound. Everything around was dim, but this time the darkness wasn't caused by those black shadows, thankfully. Who would have thought that Wilder would end up in such a state? The white beard, or rather Wilder, carefully touched the wound on his chin. I had finally healed it properly, but once I get out of here, I'll probably have to hide for another period. That wound left by the half-elf is truly troublesome. This Wilder was none other than the former president and captain of the Land Drifters. His original plan had been to bring down the powerful Gorsa, then have the three parties divide up the Wizard Tower's inheritance. This way, Wilder could attempt to advance to third rank using Gorsa's corpse and legacy. But his plan had failed. In fact, it never had any possibility of success from the very beginning. Because from the start, the information he received was inaccurate. This led him to directly underestimate Gorsa's true foundation. It also turned this captain, who had originally lived a good life, into a wanted criminal of the Kema Duchy. If not for Gorsa's sudden advancement and departure from the Western continent, Wilder's days would probably be even more difficult. Of course, he wasn't doing well now either. The wound left by the half-elf's pursuit had never healed. The half-elf's combat ability wasn't exactly top tier, but what was truly terrifying was the pollution he carried with him. The wound inflicted by his opponent would actually grow on its own. If not properly suppressed, the wound would continue to deteriorate until it turned Wilder into a pile of rotting flesh. But after being injured for so long, Wilder had also found a way to convert the pollution in the wound into his attack power. It was just that this method hurt both others and himself. After each use, he needed to suppress the wound anew. Since Wilder hadn't been able to leave this city full of strange black shadows, he naturally didn't dare to heal the wound immediately. He had been leaning against this ruin for a while now and hadn't been attacked again. Though relieved, he also found it strange. Could it be that those black shadows realized they couldn't kill me and retreated? Otherwise, why haven't they appeared for so long? Can I find an opportunity to leave? Speaking of leaving, Wilder felt somewhat hesitant. He still hadn't found the method for pushing open the inner doors that the Baton Dean had used, and he didn't know if that method was even here. So he wanted to leave, yet didn't want to leave. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind Wilder. "You are special." It was a woman's voice. The voice was somewhat hoarse, without any fluctuation or variation. Like a puppet. Wilder's face went pale. He spun around abruptly and saw a tree branch as thick as a forearm somehow protruding from a crack in the wall, with 2 brown leaves sprouting from its tip. The 2 leaves opened and closed. The woman's voice was coming from within. As Wilder remained uncertain and suspicious, the woman spoke again. "If you want a method to advance to 3rd rank, I have one." Wilder's eyes heated up. Even knowing that what lay ahead might be a trap or an illusion, when the clue he had been desperately seeking for years appeared, he couldn't help but feel excited. Of course, he remained very cautious on the surface. "Who are you?" "Bait." Wilder was somewhat puzzled, but soon he recalled a name that had long been buried in the ground. "Bethstana. Are you Bethstana from the borderland?" Wilder used to frequently run trade routes in the borderland. Anyone familiar with that region's history would arrive at Bethstana's name when combining Baton Academy, the borderland, and powerful wizards. The ruthless person who had lost in the borderland's power struggle, but still managed to break out of Hanging Valley with most of her followers. A 3rd-rank wizard who was both cruel and extremely capable. The main reason for her defeat was probably that she had faced Clark, who had the backing of the Stargate Council. Otherwise, it was uncertain who would have won or lost. And even though she lost, she had preserved her faction's foundation and an equally promising powerful demonic creature. Thinking of this, Wilder finally realized that the root walls, large tree stumps, this strange nighttime world, and the tree branch before him were probably the demonic creature that Bethstana had cultivated. So Baton Academy has always had a 3rd-rank wizard in residence. Wilder felt somewhat panicked. The external rumors don't match reality. The story about the dean losing control and mutating due to pushing doors was probably just bait to attract wild 2nd-rank wizards like us. If he had known that there was still a 3rd-rank wizard within Baton Academy, he absolutely would not have intruded into the academy. However, Wilder wasn't in complete despair at this moment, since the Bethstana before him was still communicating with him. Communication meant there was a need. In other words, he still had value to be used. With this thought, the temperament of the former Merchant Guild president returned to Wilder. "Wizard Bethstana, Please forgive my unintentional intrusion into your territory. Cut the nonsense. The leaves opposite him had no interest in listening to Wilder's words. The mental power in your body is special and can enter the tree heart space. I need you to go in and catch a spirit body. If you can do it, I'll tell you the method for advancing to third rank by pushing doors, and I can also provide you with the mental power needed for advancement. But if you can't do it and fail to satisfy me, then you'll become my nourishment. This voice still had no high or low fluctuation, yet it brought bone-chilling coldness that made all of Wilder's hair stand on end. I await your instructions. What do you need me to do? Wilder endured the pain in his chin and tried to smile as he spoke. There was nothing he could do. With inferior strength, he didn't even have the opportunity to negotiate terms. Go die first. The cold voice rang out, and the tree branch that had just been calmly conversing suddenly moved. Wilder had no time to react before the branch pierced through his skull. Then the branch slowly withdrew, stained with red and white fluids, while the brown leaves continued speaking in that unperturbed tone. You're not completely dead yet. If you complete my assignment, I'll send you back and help you advance. If you can't complete it, then you don't need to come back. The branch slowly retracted into the crack in the wall. Now we go to the tree heart space. There. Saul's tentacle withdrew from the crack in the middle of Shea's brow. The orange cat Kate on the side watched with his eye corners and whiskers twitching together. Damn, if someone wanted to stick tentacles into my skull for treatment, I'd rather die, Kate muttered in his heart. In stark contrast to Kate's shock, neither the healer nor the patient felt uncomfortable with this treatment method. Shea even curiously stuck his finger into the round hole when he touched his forehead. How amazing! So you really are a doctor. Shea's face bore a peaceful smile, completely different from his previously extremely nervous state. How did you do it? You not only suppressed Bates' control over me, but also... Halfway through his words, Shea seemed to realize something and closed his mouth again. Saul lowered his eyes. I knew there was something else abnormal about you besides Bates' control. It's probably because of this abnormality that you were able to temporarily break free from the inverted tree's control over you. Is this your biggest secret? Seeing that Saul tactfully didn't mention the other pollution within his body, Shea breathed a slight sigh of relief and gradually developed some goodwill toward Saul. This was actually an effect produced by the suppression of another type of pollution within his body. The perceptive Saul naturally noticed Shea's change. Oh right, I'm lending you this thing. When you go to the tree heart space to steal the tree seed, it should be useful. He stepped forward, using his body to block the line of sight of Kate beside him, and handed a small object to Shea. At the same time, he also blocked Shea's face, preventing Kate behind him from seeing that from the round hole in Shea's forehead. A colorful pupil eye had suddenly emerged. Chapter 733, Exit. What is this thing? Shea looked down, not noticing that he now had an extra eye in the center of his forehead. What Saul had given him was a white tooth, wrapped in a gray, transparent substance. It looked like a beast's tooth, encased in gray amber. It's a tooth, Saul answered very seriously. Shea across from him rolled his eyes speechlessly. I can see that. Saul smiled. You'd better not know exactly what it is. Just know that if you're in a critical situation with no other way to save yourself, this thing can cause extreme damage to both you and your enemy. Shea's eyes widened speechlessly again. Then why are you lending it to me? For suicide, to avoid being controlled by Bate and becoming her slave. It's slow suicide. Saul remained calm. As long as you win, you can come back to find me before you die and I can save you. If you lose, at least you can still get revenge. Shea looked conflicted, but still accepted the wrapped tooth. Then Saul used secret speech to tell Shea how to use the tooth. Shea stared at Saul with wide eyes, wanting to speak but hesitating. Saul patted Shea's back. "All right." The house around them began to shake again. The orange cat Kate immediately arched his back, then stood upright after regaining his composure. "Those tree roots are coming again." Shea was about to transform into a full moon again but was stopped by Saul. "Don't worry about us anymore. Go directly where you need to go. Bait is recovering faster and faster. You don't have much time left." The orange cat was stunned and asked first, "Then what about us?" "Fight if we can win, run if we can't," Saul said indifferently. Kate's cat eyes widened. But Shea was decisive. "Fine, then take care of yourselves." His figure instantly disappeared, completely unconcerned about who would remove his pollution if Saul and the orange cat died under the tree roots' attack. He seemed to suddenly have much more trust in Saul. After Shea left, this originally unstable space was immediately invaded by countless thick tree roots and branches. These tree roots and branches seemed to have their own consciousness. As soon as they broke through the room, they immediately launched an attack on Saul and the orange cat. The orange cat Kate nervously prepared to find a gap to fight, but before he could act, Saul grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and lifted him up. "Kate, what are you doing? Put me down quickly." But Saul said calmly, "The deal has been made. There's no need to stay here anymore." Kate was even more confused. Looking at those sharp branches about to touch him, he was just about to cast a spell when Saul yanked him, directly interrupting it. "Hey!" However, the next second, Kate found that the entire world had suddenly stopped. The damaged house, flying debris, roaring tree roots, sharp thorns. Everything was quietly staying in place. Only the hand behind him was still carrying him, spinning in the air. "What's happening?" Then he heard Saul's voice. "To leave this place, you need to see this place clearly." Saul surveyed the world that had suddenly stopped due to his mental power suppression. Just like old days manner, if you can't see the path before you clearly, you won't find the exit. He lifted the orange cat and flew into midair. "Kate, actually this city is upside down." Without giving Kate time to understand, Saul closed his eyes. The moment he closed his eyes, Kate suddenly felt dizzy and disoriented. When he adapted to the dizziness, he suddenly found that the world had turned upside down. Gravity was coming from overhead, but he wasn't falling toward the ground. "What's keeping me from falling?" Kate looked down to check, then was startled by what he saw. The reason he hadn't fallen to the overhead was that there were many fine rootlets under his feet, wrapped around his limbs and torso. And these rootlets had extremely fine tips that were drilling into his body through the pores of his skin. "Oh my!" Kate immediately struggled, trying to shake off the rootlets' entanglement. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't tear off the rootlets on his body. Just as he was about to try lighting them on fire, he heard Saul's calm voice again. "Don't be afraid." Saul also opened his eyes, saw the rootlets on his body and didn't care at all. He looked up and around. The house Shea had created collapsed with a thunderous crash, falling toward the overhead. Through the swirling dust, he could vaguely see many tall black shadows standing around. In the distance were many square shadows that looked like high-rise buildings. Nearby were also several thin, long shadows resembling streetlights. It was as if the nighttime city they had just left had actively come looking for them. Saul waved his hand, and wind carried away the dust, making the surrounding scenery clear. "My God!" came Kate's weak exclamation from beside him. "Have we always been in this kind of place?" "Yes." Saul was also somewhat shocked. "So this is how Bait's sacrifice works." Were the towering buildings around them actually buildings? They were extremely thick, straight tree branches reaching toward the sky. In Saul's eyes, they looked like high-rise buildings. Growing within these branches were hard nodules that looked like tumors. and in the middle of the nodules were human heads. Looking carefully, it wasn't that heads were growing on top, but rather that people were wrapped in the tree's fruit, with only their heads left outside, hanging limply. Saul suspected that the shadows they saw at night and the pedestrians they saw during the day were all the souls of these people. Dull and mechanical, they were puppets completely controlled by the inverted tree. Life and death could be easily controlled by another's will. Unlike the conscious Shea, these trapped people probably still lived in that originally busy city full of false hope. Until death, then being forgotten. The rootlets on Saul and Kate's bodies grew more numerous and penetrated deeper into their skin. What do? Will we also become like those people, trapped here forever? Kate's voice was also trembling. Meow, he couldn't help but cry out again. Since we can already see the path clearly, we can find the exit back. After Saul finished speaking, the skin on his body suddenly began to peel away, revealing the black bones underneath. As the skin disappeared, the rootlets wrapped around him suddenly lost their grip. Just as the rootlets tried to continue forward to entangle Saul's skeleton, several gray tentacles extended out, reversely coiling around the rootlets and gently twisting, snapping them. Black smoke poured out from the broken ends of the rootlets. That was pollution belonging to the inverted tree. When Saul was still a first-rank wizard, he had once been afraid to tangle with the rootlets because of this pollution, but now, black viscous liquid was expelled by the suction cups on the tentacles, directly spraying onto the black smoke and staining the nearby rootlets. These black liquids were like piranhas suddenly released into water. Upon contact with the black smoke and rootlets, they began desperately corroding and rapidly spreading, directly clearing out all the nearby rootlets. Kate, being carried by Saul, was naturally also stained with the black liquid. Seeing those corroded rootlets, he thought he would suffer the same fate and was so scared he kept meowing. After crying for a while, he finally realized that the black liquid on his body only corroded the rootlets on him, while he himself was completely unharmed. The surrounding branches and rootlets instinctively felt fear toward the black liquid Saul released, curling up and retreating one by one. As large numbers of rootlets retreated, they revealed a point of light not far below Saul's feet. There, Kate immediately realized that was the exit from the inverted tree, so it was underground all along. Saul looked up one last time at the overhead. There was a black sea of fire, with countless human figures struggling within it. Then he restored his appearance and flew toward the light point with Kate. Passing through, the light point was like crossing into another world. With a flash of light, Saul and Kate returned to the bare tree stump with its very fresh cross-section. Chapter 734, Dean Pond. Kate felt Saul release his scruff and immediately jumped to the ground. After releasing the orange cat, Saul immediately looked around. The white-bearded wizard hasn't come out yet. But he had wandered the nighttime city for a long time without finding the white beard, thinking the other party had already found an exit. Actually, if Saul hadn't been looking for an opportunity to steal the tree seed, he wouldn't have needed to stay inside for so long. Oh, you don't need to worry about Wilder. That guy is very cunning. He won't die in there. After being brought out by Saul, Kate was obviously much more flattering. The black liquid from earlier had left him with lingering fear. He was afraid that if Saul got unhappy, he might spray his face with it. Wilder, hearing this name, Saul had a moment of realization. It's unlikely to be a coincidence. I didn't expect the captain of the land drifters to be hiding here. Does he already know who I am? While Saul was thinking, Kate was still sighing. Baton Academy has become like this, so their dean probably turned into a flower bud too. What we're looking for, eh? Kate stopped mid-sentence because he discovered that on the originally empty tree stump, a person had suddenly appeared. an old man with disheveled hair, a face full of wrinkles and confused eyes. Dean Pond. Although it had been a long time since they'd met, and although the other party's appearance and demeanor had greatly changed, Saul immediately recognized his identity. Baton Academy, Dean Pond. He's Dean Pond. Kate was delighted and was about to approach, but stopped when he saw what was behind Pond. Those are the rootlets we encountered. Behind Dean Pond, densely packed thin rootlets were actually growing. These rootlets were connected to the center of the tree stump. The thin root tubes looked like human blood vessels, and you could vaguely see something being transported through them toward the aged Dean Pond. Why would these rootlets appear here? Saul slowly walked forward. These are originally the roots of the inverted tree. It's normal for them to appear both inside and outside. Don't get too close yet. After speaking, Saul stepped forward and came before Pond. Dean, do you still remember me? The Dean, looking completely bewildered, raised his head slightly upon hearing Saul's voice, then quickly lowered it again. Is he like those black shadows inside, having lost all self-consciousness? Kate was obviously very concerned about the Dean. He was still hopping to get the method for opening doors from the Dean. Saul also wanted to have a good conversation with Dean Pond. Although the other party wasn't the actual controller of Baton Academy, he had led the academy for so many years and must have more understanding of bait and the inverted tree. Although he had already sent Shea to steal the tree seed, it didn't prevent Saul from making another effort through Dean Pond as a channel. To ensure success, he didn't mind making a deal with the Dean as well. Can you hear me speaking? Saul released a wave of mental power, scanning Dean Pond's entire body. Unexpectedly, the other party's physical condition was very good, so good it could almost rival a second-rank wizard at peak level. But Dean Pond's mental state definitely had problems. When Saul scanned him with mental power, his spiritual body didn't even show the most basic stress response. Maybe his soul body is inside the inverted tree, with only his body remaining outside. Saul raised his hand, transforming his index finger into a tentacle shape and touching Pond's forehead. After a moment, Saul released his hand. Strange, the soul is still there, and there's no excessive pollution. Saul stepped back 2 paces and observed for another moment, then suddenly smiled. I've encountered so much pollution recently that my thinking has become rigid. This isn't an effect caused by pollution, it's magic. He cast a 0th rank, Clear Mind spell on Dean Pond. Although it was only a 0th rank spell, when cast by him as a 3rd rank wizard, the effect was almost comparable to 3rd or 4th rank magic. After a moment, the numb-faced Dean Pond suddenly shuddered all over. He nearly collapsed, but was pulled back upright by the rootlets piercing his body from behind. Sweat immediately broke out on his face like beans. Obviously, while Saul had awakened him, he had also restored his sensation, making him suffer from the torture of the rootlets behind him. But the Dean was also a tough person. Although he was nearly knocked down by the sudden pain, he quickly adapted, enduring the pain from behind and raising his head to face Saul. Is it you? Pond actually showed a smile on his face. I heard you went to the borderland. I didn't expect that when we met again, you'd already advanced to 2nd rank wizard, worthy of being Gorse's student. Saul turned his head to look behind Dean Pond. Aren't you concerned about your own condition? Pond slightly turned his head back, wanting to see his back, but his neck had only twisted halfway when the pain became unbearable. Even though he was an experienced old wizard, he could barely endure it. He smiled bitterly and said, I'd rather not be concerned. It reduces the suffering somewhat. Since the other party wasn't worried about his own body, Saul didn't waste words either. Bait turned all the bodies of people in the inner city to ash to cover up the fact that she absorbed these people's spirit bodies, right? Pond immediately showed a pained expression. Even Saul couldn't tell whether this emotion was real or fake. I wanted to save her, but she deceived me. She's no longer the original Bethstana. For the sake of resurrection, she doesn't even care about the Academy's inheritance. Inheritance? You mean the inverted tree? Bates' resurrection efforts are also harmful to the inverted tree, right? Pond smiled bitterly. Although I don't know where you learned about the inverted tree, you're right. Forcibly resurrecting bait would consume a large amount of the inverted tree's essence, causing irreversible damage to it, even potentially causing the tree to wither. Previously, we had always deliberately slowed the resurrection progress to ensure the inverted tree wouldn't suffer too much damage. But when that madman Shea stole the tree seed, both bait and the inverted tree suffered severe damage. At that point, according to our original plan, we should have prioritized protecting the inverted tree, but bait. She chose to protect herself first, almost overdrawing the inverted tree's essence. Speaking of this, Dean Pond's face again showed pain. She wasn't originally this kind of person. She clearly sacrificed herself to protect the Academy's inheritance. Time can change a person, as can experiences. Saul was also someone who had died once, but he had forgotten the process of death. Thinking about it now, perhaps that was his fortune. However, Saul didn't have time to lament Pond's situation. He frowned and said, "What Shea stole was the inverted tree's seed." Kate's whiskers behind him trembled as he forcibly suppressed laughter. Seeing the person who suppressed him in trouble, Kate was very pleased. Still making deals with people, treating the other party first, but it turns out the thing he wanted was right on the person and they didn't give it to him. Served him right, didn't it? Pond nodded, confirming Saul's guess. Saul touched his chin. That shouldn't be right. He narrowed his eyes, confirming that the causality principle had been achieved. The other party only had first-rank strength, and even if he had become second-rank inside the inverted tree, he couldn't resist the guidance of fate lines and causality. Since the causality principle has been achieved, either Shea doesn't know that what he stole was the tree seed, but this possibility is small, or in that situation, he couldn't hand the tree seed over to me. Saul wasn't angry. He thought, fortunately, I habitually kept a backup plan. Then he smiled at Pond again. Dean Pond, shall we make a deal? Chapter 735, Sacrifice. In my current state, what could I possibly trade with you? I'll help you find Shea, and you arrange for me to meet Bait. Pond was stunned. Kate behind him was also stunned. Dean Pond, who didn't know about Saul's teammate betraying operation, could only respond, "You want me to help you contact Bait?" Saul shrugged his shoulders. "Although you appear to be in great pain, the fact that you can stand here is also Bait's manipulation, right? I think you should have a way to contact her." Pond gritted his teeth and said, "I don't know why she specifically left me behind, but I can't actively contact her. If you really want to find her, you can directly perform astral projection and go to the tree heart space of the inverted tree. She's definitely there. You're a wizard who majors in dark attributes, so this shouldn't be difficult for you." Indeed, it's not difficult, but giving up home field advantage to go to a tree heart space completely controlled by Bait, then simultaneously facing a former third-rank wizard and a currently third-rank demonic creature. To gamble that they still have enough rationality not to kill me immediately. Saul placed his hands on Dean Pond's shoulders, ignoring the pain on his face. "Or you could also relay a message to Bait. I want to make a deal with her. If she's willing, I can help her overcome the difficulties of resurrection." Kate behind them couldn't listen anymore. He felt this Black Blade wizard was simply bizarre. Kate acknowledged that he was very powerful, but that was a third-rank wizard. He actually had the audacity to say he would help Bait resurrect. Wait, didn't Baton's dean just say he was Gorsa's student? Could he possibly invite Gorsa? Kate didn't know Saul's identity, but Gorse's great name had resounded throughout the entire Western continent for the past 100 years. No wizard who had lived here didn't know of his power and dominance. However, this person was also famously indifferent to everything. Even when wizards from Gorse's Wizard Tower encountered danger outside and were schemed against, he never stood up for his subordinates. Could such a person really be invited by the Black Blade Wizard? But this Black Blade Wizard was also extraordinary. He was simply a cunning merchant. In less than half a day, how many people had he made deals with? And he turned around and sold his former partner Shea without any hesitation. Kate had originally wanted to follow Saul to find opportunities for some benefits. Now, thinking about it, he'd better not. He might not be able to outmaneuver Saul. Thinking this way, the orange cat began slowly retreating. The current enemies of Baton Academy had become 2 third ranks. This wasn't a struggle he should participate in. Fleeing was the best strategy. Kate's decision was very wise. Just as he quietly retreated more than 10 meters, Saul and Dean Pond suddenly had a falling out. The Dean, whose expression had been very painful just moments ago, suddenly raised his head, actually showing a sinister smile on his face. 2 thin rootlets suddenly shot out from his shoulders, quickly locking onto Saul's arms. At the same time, branches as thick as pythons grew in the blink of an eye in front, behind, left, and right of Saul's position. They were like prison bars, trapping Saul and Dean Pond within. Pond stared at Saul's face, his eyes showing greed for the first time. "No need for you to worry. Lady Bate already has a method for resurrection." As he spoke, more branches and rootlets wound around Saul's body. Saul tried to struggle, but found these rootlets were unusually tough, even stronger than those he'd encountered inside the inverted tree. Not only that, the moment these branches and rootlets wrapped around Saul's body, they began emitting a natural fragrance like grass and trees after rain. Even with Saul's sense of smell, he almost failed to detect this scent. Poison gas. Saul discovered that this gas would also drill into his body upon contact. Obviously, stopping his breath couldn't prevent the poison gas from entering his body. Seeing that Saul had failed to break free several times, the surrounding prison had completely closed and the sprouting had begun to take effect. Pond finally didn't need to pretend anymore. The wrinkles on his face became deeper textures. His graying hair and beard became thicker and longer, identical to the rootlets behind him. His skin turned into brown bark while his facial features, eyes, mouth, nose, became several holes in the tree. Dean Pond had actually already become a tree person. Saul sighed. "So you've long since merged with the inverted tree. No wonder you're connected to so many rootlets. But why are you helping Bate? Aren't you afraid she'll really kill the inverted tree? You won't survive either in that case." But Pond didn't explain. He was just extremely excited. "Originally, we only wanted to lure some greedy second-rank wizards, but we didn't expect to catch such an arrogant, newly advanced third rank like you. What an unexpected joy. With you as nourishment, Lady Bate will definitely successfully resurrect." Just as Saul was about to say something, a tremendous explosion suddenly caught his attention. This sound came from outside the closed branch cage, and it wasn't just one sound. It was dozens of sounds, continuous and unending. The massive explosion sounds grew more and more distant, from inside out. As if centered on the inverted tree, a chain explosion had occurred. This sound didn't stop for a long time, accompanied by earth-shaking tremors that grew more powerful and terrifying. Saul could already visualize the tragic scene in Kogust's outer city. Even trapped within the branches, he could imagine what kind of horrific disaster was happening outside. He turned back and said in shock, "You're going to sacrifice the outer city, sacrifice all of Kogust." Pond was only busy laughing maniacally, rejoicing in the plan's success, completely ignoring Saul's question. Saul sighed. "Ah, it seems you don't intend to make this deal with me." Suddenly his expression changed, his gaze becoming sharp. "Courtesy before force. Since negotiations have broken down, let's fight." He shook his arms, and the branches that had just been tightly wrapped around him suddenly drooped loosely, as if they had suddenly lost their support. The rootlets that had pierced Saul's palms also broke inch by inch, the debris falling to the ground looking as if it had been highly corroded. Pon's laughter stuck in his throat, his wooden eyes almost splitting. Saul raised his head again, his face no longer having flesh, having become a black skull. "Isn't it just mental manipulation and pollution corrosion? I'm quite skilled at this too." After speaking, large patches of gray tentacles suddenly burst out from under his wizard robe, like a peacock spreading its tail, instantly shooting toward the surrounding branches of the inverted tree, immediately piercing the closed prison full of holes. Sunlight shone in, falling on Saul's face, and black mist instantly appeared in the light beams, making Saul instantly look like an envoy from the abyss. The smile completely disappeared from Pon's face. Suddenly, a large number of new shoots sprouted from his bark-like rough face, quickly growing brown leaves. The leaves came in pairs, their edges like sharp teeth, clashing against each other and producing metallic collision sounds when they opened and closed. Then a large number of leaves bit towards Saul and his surrounding tentacles like mad dogs. The leaves that bit the tentacles immediately pierced through the tentacle's surface skin, but the bitten areas of the tentacles also leaked black liquid, directly corroding the leaves. But more leaves subsequently pounced on Saul. The leaves that bit Saul's bones couldn't leave the slightest mark on them. Bones that could withstand the corrosion of the black tide wouldn't be hurt by a few demonic leaves. But at the same time, Saul was also restrained by the leaves' attack. Seeing Saul trapped by him again, Pond breathed a slight sigh of relief. "Although I've trapped him, I still can't absorb his soul. It's a pity I can't turn him into Lady Bate's sacrifice for now. However, once Lady Bate completely sacrifices the entire city and merges with the inverted tree to become a new locator, she'll truly resurrect. By then, this boy will become Lady Bate's first supplement after resurrection." A smile returned to Tree Person Pond's face. Chapter 736, Wishing Candle. But it wasn't going as smoothly as Dean Pond had imagined. Bate was more forced into launching the sacrifice prematurely. Time rewound. When Saul hadn't yet left the inverted tree, due to the special spatial properties, Shea had already arrived at the tree heart space. The moment Shea entered, Bate discovered his presence. "You actually came back on your own. I thought you wouldn't show yourself until the very last moment." Her voice was hoarse and devoid of any emotion. If Shea hadn't been very clear that he had completely offended Bate, he might have thought she was truly calm. Shea still appeared human, but his body was glowing faintly. This radiance illuminated the entire tree heart space. It also illuminated Bethstana at the very bottom. She lay naked on a floating, hollow magical formation. The naked Bethstana wasn't truly exposed, because currently only her cheeks, neck, and limbs retained some pale skin. Everywhere else had already become densely packed rootlets. There were almost thousands upon thousands of rootlets, hanging and curving like silk threads on a weaving machine. The rootlets also had equally numerous tiny hairs. They seemed to be the product of combining human skin characteristics with tree roots. This meant that Bethstana didn't need to see Shea to sense his arrival. At the same time, Shea was also clear about this. He was even clearer that Bethstana relied on these hair-bearing rootlets to control every spirit body within the inverted tree. When she didn't need them, the spirit bodies would remain motionless according to predetermined designs, or repeat single actions. But when Bethstana needed them, those spirit bodies could instantly become killing weapons, absolutely loyal to their master, relentless against enemies, until the last trace of energy in their spirit bodies was exhausted. It was precisely because Shea understood this so well that he would risk soul annihilation to steal the tree seed. He hadn't told Saul that the tree seed was inside his body. First, this was his only means of confronting Bethstana. With this tree seed, Bethstana would be wary of whether he might destroy it if pushed to desperation. Second, Shea temporarily had no ability to extract the tree seed from his body, because he couldn't truly control it. However, if Shea could really defeat the currently movement-restricted Bethstana, he wouldn't mind fulfilling his deal with Saul and handing the tree seed over to him. Bethstana, I've returned. I know your current state is very poor, and even if you forcibly launch the sacrifice, there's a great possibility of failure. So I've come back. As long as you give me a promise, I'll return the tree seed to you, which will increase your chances of success. For some reason, when Shea said these words, he suddenly thought of Saul, who had made a deal with him earlier, and unconsciously imitated Saul's movements and expressions. Bethstana was indeed very weak. She knew that Shea understood this, so she didn't hide it either. What promise do you need? Shea straightened his chest. I want to become a branch of the inverted tree-like pond. Afterward, I can serve you, but you must grant me freedom when I can survive independently. Agreed, come over. After I extract the tree seed from your body, I'll give you a branch to inhabit. Bethstana was so straightforward that Shea hesitated instead. How is this different from what I expected? But despite his unease, Shea had no way back. He was like a warrior facing death with resolve, flying toward Bethstana. The densely packed rootlets actively parted to both sides, making way for Shea. Shea continued flying forward. I don't trust you. I need to sign a magical contract. We're both in spirit-body states now, but I have a type of contract here that can be signed without requiring magic power. As Shea spoke, a candle suddenly appeared in his palm. This candle was entirely white and unremarkable, just like ordinary white wax used by nobles daily. As soon as the candle was brought out, it automatically ignited with a stable flame, though it was unclear what was burning. Bethstana, who had been somewhat indifferent, also focused her attention. Magical tools that could be preserved within a spirit body were definitely not simple. Two rootlets suddenly coiled rapidly toward Shea, seemingly trying to snatch the candle from his hand. Shea quickly shouted, "Don't move carelessly or I'll leave immediately." But he had only spoken halfway when, with all his attention drawn to the attacking rootlets in front of him, a man with a full black beard suddenly appeared behind him. This man embraced Shea from behind and bit his shoulder. Shea immediately understood that Bethstana had no intention of making a deal with him, and had prepared an ambush behind him all along. Just as he was about to break free from the person behind him, he felt numbness spreading from his shoulder. The numbness quickly spread from his shoulder, and Shea immediately felt his consciousness becoming sluggish. He turned his head with difficulty, and finally saw the appearance of the man behind him. Shea had never seen this man in the inverted tree before. He had a full beard, and where there was no beard, his skin was completely festering. He didn't know how a person could make their soul look like this. The man ambushing Shea was naturally Wilder's soul, brought to the tree heart space by Bethstana. Although he was very dissatisfied that Bethstana had directly extracted his soul without even greeting him, the situation was already done, and he was powerless to resist, so he could only first follow Bethstana's request and help her restrain Shea. When he bit Shea's shoulder, he used all his strength to activate his spiritual body, transmitting mental fluctuations into Shea's spirit body. At the same time, he also transmitted the elf pollution lurking in his spirit body. Shea, just encountering elf pollution, was indeed restrained by this domineering pollution, and could do nothing but desperately resist the pollution entering his spirit body. Wilder immediately escorted Shea toward Bethstana at the center of the space. Hurry up. Although elf pollution is domineering, it's not completely impossible to resist. Shea was brought to Bethstana's side, his eyes still showing terror. However, just when the two were less than 3 meters apart and Bethstana had begun scanning Shea's spirit body, Shea, who had been struggling in numbness, suddenly blew on the white candle in his hand. Because his face was numb, the breath Shea blew out was very weak. Logically speaking, such airflow could hardly disturb the flame. But with Shea's gentle blow, the steadily burning white candle suddenly extinguished. Then the candle in Shea's hand disappeared and transformed into a transparent crystal bottle the next second. The crystal bottle contained equally transparent liquid that looked like the most ordinary spring water. Before others could react, Shea's finger gently removed the cork from the crystal bottle. Immediately, a sweet fragrance spread out. Just as Shea smelled this scent, the numbness on his body quickly receded, as if it had encountered some nemesis. The most shocked was Wilder behind him, because he also smelled the scent of the spring water that had suddenly appeared. And the elf pollution that had troubled him for years actually retreated so easily under the influence of this sweet fragrance. Wilder immediately became excited and, disregarding Bethstana's presence, blurted out, "What is that bottle of water?" Shea didn't speak but instead pressed his hand against Wilder's face. Light flashed, and the other party was instantly moved outside the tree heart space. Shea couldn't immediately kill Wilder, but possessing the tree heart, he could first throw this unexpected person out. After dealing with Wilder, Shea immediately rushed toward Bethstana, while in his hand appeared a white tooth sealed in gray amber. Bethstana paid no attention to the tooth in Shea's hand that emitted no threatening aura, but stared at the crystal bottle in Shea's other hand, suddenly shouting like a madwoman, "Wishing candle! What you just held was a wishing candle. That legendary cursed object is actually in your hands." Chapter 737, Spy Within Spy Within Spy. Yes, it's the wishing candle. Right after answering, he bit down hard on his teeth with a helpless expression. Then Shea accelerated toward Bethstana. Bethstana also released a large number of rootlets toward Shea, suddenly no longer concerned about the tree seed in Shea's body, preparing to directly suppress Shea with force. Since the wishing candle has appeared, I don't need to care about the tree heart anymore. Bethstana suddenly stopped suppressing her emotions, and her remaining human features began twisting like a demon's. While approaching Bethstana, Shea tried hard to dodge the rootlets attacking from front and back. When he really couldn't avoid them, he activated the tree heart's power to directly move away the rootlets that touched him. Despite the tree heart's assistance, Shea still got several wounds on his body due to slow reactions. The skin around the wounds became rough and brown, like tree bark. But at this moment, Shea had no time to treat the wounds and the pollution on them. Damn it, the wishing candle was originally meant to be used at this moment, but I had to use it on that big bearded guy prematurely. Without his trump card, Shea could only rely on willpower and keen observation to dodge the rootlets stabbing at him, struggling to get closer to Bethstana. But just as Shea was about to touch Bethstana, he was still pierced through the thigh and lower abdomen by 2 rootlets attacking from left and right, unable to advance further. Shea was helpless. He could already feel the rootlet that pierced his abdomen searching for the tree seed within his soul body. If it took the tree seed, he would no longer have any ability to resist. And Bethstana's recent appearance clearly showed she no longer cared much about the tree seed's integrity. She was willing to damage the tree seed to forcibly extract it, probably waiting for Shea to lose the tree seed's protection before seizing his wishing candle. Without the tree seed's protection, Shea would have difficulty resisting her manipulation when Bethstana was on guard. Once he became a puppet, he would uncontrollably hand over the wishing candle. Absolutely not. Thinking of this, Shea's eyes were already bloodshot. The wishing candle is my last hope. No one can take it away. Shea took one last look at the amber tooth in his hand. Still can't reach her, but at this distance it should still work. Whatever, if I don't use it now, there won't be another chance. Shea crushed the gray substance wrapping the white tooth, as easily as peeling a peanut. Before crushing the white fang's outer shell, Shea had no time to think about what weapon Saul had given him. And after he crushed the white fang's outer shell, he completely lost the ability to think. So he also couldn't see that the originally frenzied Bethstana, upon seeing the white fang and sensing its aura, suddenly became extremely terrified, even hysterical. Anchor point. Bethstana suddenly retreated. This was also the first time she had moved within the tree heart space. Hundreds of rootlets connected to her body were torn apart during the movement. The immense pain was as if someone had reached into her body and torn apart her tendons and bones. But even enduring this terrible agony, Bethstana still didn't stop retreating. At this moment, she had forgotten about the wishing candle and only wanted to run. It wasn't until she retreated to the edge of the tree heart space that Bethstana had to stop. But this pause also allowed her nearly chaotic consciousness to stabilize slightly. Only then did she notice that the anchor point that had scared her to near cardiac arrest hadn't actually erupted with terrible black tide pollution. At least she hadn't turned into a sculpture yet, nor had flowers grown from various orifices of her body. A sealed anchor point. Her voice still carried the weakness of someone who had survived a disaster. The current Bethstana wasn't truly third rank after all, so her fear of black tide pollution was even greater than when she was alive. However, because she hadn't directly contacted that tooth, although she could feel the terrifying aura on it, she hadn't lost her sanity like Shea, who had direct contact with the anchor point. Damn it! After extreme terror, Bethstana turned to extreme rage. She suddenly swung her arm that had transformed into rootlets, stabbing several rootlets into Shea's body at once, almost turning him into a honeycomb. Then she pulled, directly tearing a large hole in Shea's stomach. A brown seed was carefully brought out from Shea's stomach, wrapped in rootlets. Bethstana carefully avoided the tooth in Shea's hand, preparing to retrieve the tree seed first. Only by retrieving the tree seed would she have enough power to move both Shea and that damned anchor point out of the tree heart space together. Only then could she breathe a sigh of relief and slowly deal with Shea. But just as Bethstana was about to reabsorb the tree seed into her body, another change occurred. A silver shadow suddenly rushed at extreme speed like lightning to the tree seed's side and grabbed the seed wrapped by two rootlets. Bethstana hadn't expected that at this moment there would still be a spirit body reckless enough to steal from her. Instantly, more rootlets surged toward that silver figure, determined to turn that thief into pulp. Although the silver figure was fast to steal the tree seed, it had to stay in place. Just as numerous rootlets were about to destroy this silver shadow, an even smaller silver shadow emerged from within the silver figure. What appeared this time was actually a silver, metal-like butterfly. The butterfly flapped its wings. Though it seemed slow, it entered Bethstana's forehead in an instant. And the already exhausted Bethstana immediately closed her eyes and hung her head as if falling asleep. All the rootlets that were about to pierce the silver shadow also stopped motionless. "Quick!" Penny's voice rang in Herman's mind. "Got it." The silver-clad Herman quickly took advantage of the opportunity to retrieve the tree seed from among the motionless rootlets. The second he got the tree seed, the surrounding rootlets suddenly moved again. Bethstana had actually awakened within a single breath. At the same time, the silver nightmare butterfly was directly shaken out of her body. Seeing this, Hermann said nothing and directly merged with the tree heart. "I will kill you all." Bethstana felt she had been toyed with, and all her previous emotions turned into boundless rage. With her roar, densely packed rootlets like a rainstorm stabbed simultaneously toward Hermann and Penny. But Hermann, having obtained the tree heart, now had the same ability to move within the tree heart space as Shea had before. His figure instantly disappeared, then like Shea, immediately hid. Penny, however, didn't have the ability to teleport away. But she wasn't afraid at all, even mocking Bethstana. "HMPH, Master tried to make a good deal with you, but you wanted to kill Master. You deserve to be left here alone to become a pile of mush." Sharp rootlets stabbed toward the butterfly in ranks, but after the whistling sound of the rootlets passed, the nightmare butterfly that had been hovering in the air had vanished without a trace. As if it had also obtained the tree seed and gained the ability to teleport within the tree heart space. But there was only one tree seed. How exactly had it left? Bethstana showed a confused to shocked expression for the first time. Had the inverted tree already been taken over by someone else? Otherwise, how could so many incomprehensible things happen in just a few seconds? The bewildered and panicked Bethstana immediately turned to look for Shea, who had lost consciousness from anchor point pollution. However, she despairingly discovered that Shea was no longer there either. In the pitch-black space, only a white tooth remained, quietly floating. No! Bethstana almost went mad. Although the anchor point was in a sealed state, the pollution it slowly emitted could still, with time's assistance, turn the weakened Bethstana into a pile of mush. Sacrifice. The desperate Bethstana could only think of this one solution. She would sacrifice the souls of everyone in Kaugust's inner and outer cities, surrounding towns, all people who set foot on this land, to nourish herself. A sharp shriek. Invisible waves transmitted through the earth. Brown tree branches like century-old trees drilled out from underground, then instantly exploded, scattering large amounts of black smoke and dust mixed with the fragrance of green grass, from the inner city to the outer city, finally not even sparing the surrounding towns. Massive and continuous explosive sounds immediately resounded through heaven and earth. Chapter 738, Chaos. Saul, who was being torn and bitten by numerous branches and leaves, suddenly spoke. This made Dean Pond across from him alert again. He now absolutely didn't dare underestimate this newly advanced third-rank Saul. But he was only a second-rank wizard. Even with the inverted tree's help, he could only temporarily control the other party. So when the seemingly bound person suddenly spoke without obstruction, Pond's heart, which had just settled, rose to his throat again. Saul was still talking to himself. "Hermann got the tree seed. I need to go pick him up." Hearing the word tree seed, Pond didn't know if the other party was bluffing him and could only command the branches to wrap around Saul in the middle layer after layer, almost forming a ball of yarn. But Saul's voice remained steady and strong. "Tell Kelly the formation can be activated now." Before Pond could think again about the meaning of Saul's words, the tree branch restraints in front of him, which seemed tight and inescapable, suddenly split open with a vertical crack down the middle. Then that crack kept extending, splitting, extending again, splitting again. Like an eggshell easily cracked by someone. Then came a crash. The branches, leaves, and numerous thin rootlets restraining Saul all turned to fragments and fell to the ground. The interior of these fragments was also stained with black liquid, continuing to corrode the tree branch remains. Saul stepped forward, walking out of the circle formed by the scattered branches and roots, standing before Pond. I told you not to compete with me on pollution. If I wasn't keeping the inverted tree for a purpose, I would have melted you all long ago. The black skull before him was like an envoy from the abyss. Pond lost all courage to fight him in an instant. After his most powerful weapon was easily corroded by the other party. His previous faith in serving Lady Bethstana was ruthlessly shattered like the tree branch cage just moments ago. Pond stood in place without even a chance to escape. The last scene he saw was a semi-transparent gray tentacle with suction cups lined with sharp teeth. Casually flinging away what looked like a wooden figure struck by lightning, Saul prepared to enter the inverted tree again to pick up Herman. He had just directly recalled Penny to the dead wizard's diary, but Herman was carrying the tree seed and couldn't return directly to the diary. So he had to trouble himself as the master to pick him up. However, before stepping into the inverted tree's internal space, Saul looked back and scanned behind him, but didn't see the orange cat's figure. Looks like Kate has already taken the opportunity to escape. Heh, going to the outer city at this time. May he take care of himself. That orange cat probably would never think that actually, the most dangerous place was the safest place. Saul naturally wouldn't waste time looking for a cat. Their transaction had long since ended. Now he was anxious to bring Herman back. At the same time, if Shea was still alive, then Saul still had a deal he wanted to discuss with him. Saul jumped into the tree stump, and his figure disappeared. There, Kaugust's outer city. Panic, death, struggle, disaster. Second-level wizard apprentice Doze tightly hugged the magic books he had just bought, following the crowd fleeing toward the outer city gates. None of them knew how the disaster had occurred. They only knew that suddenly, a large number of tree roots and branches had emerged from underground and quickly exploded. Many ordinary people were killed or injured in the blasts, and wizard apprentices would show obvious signs of mutation due to the black gas produced by the explosions. But these apprentices hadn't had time to mutate before being pierced through the body by tree roots and branches growing from underground, wrapped in cocoons by more numerous and finer rootlets, only leaving their heads hanging limply. Such scenes frightened Doze so much that his hands and feet went weak, and he could only desperately run toward the city outskirts. There were many wizard apprentices like Doze in Kaugust's outer city. Suddenly, a crack appeared under Doze's feet, shaking him unsteady and causing him to lean to one side. But then he was glad he hadn't stood firm and had swayed. Because the next second, numerous branches drilled out of the crack, directly turning the person beside Doze into a porcupine. He recognized that person. It was the third-level wizard apprentice who had taken over refugee duties from him. The once arrogant third-level apprentice now hung in midair like a little worm, dying completely without even a chance to struggle or cast spells. Wiping the hot blood that had splashed on his face, Doze almost forgot he was a wizard apprentice who could use magic to directly clean the blood off his face. He staggered up with one hand on the ground, then continued running bent over. But he left the magic books he had bought at great expense on the spot. The abandoned books were half buried under soil and beneath a corpse. Not long after, an orange cat emerged from the ruins, nimbly dodging tree roots stabbing at him. He stepped on the books on the ground and nearly slipped. Then, after steadying himself, Kate looked up and saw the corpse hanging nearby, gradually being wrapped into a cocoon by fine rootlets. Crazy, crazy, it's really crazy. The orange cat looked around and found a small path with fewer people to continue his escape. There, outside Kaugust City, Kelly was sitting on the roof of a two-story building, chin propped on her hand, waiting for Saul's signal. What do you think Saul wants to do with such a big spectacle? Agu and Anne sat on either side of Kelly. Agu remained silent because he could see this combined magical formation was anything but simple. Even as an auxiliary formation, it required both Kelly and him working together to complete its construction. Anne on the other side had a slight smile. Maybe Master wants to occupy this city. Agu looked at Anne speechlessly. Although he wasn't very clear about what Saul had come to do, he knew Saul should have come to get something. He still understood his master. He had no interest in conquering the world. Even the borderland needed others to help him manage it. He could say he was like Gorsa. They were identical. I don't think so, Anne swayed her head. Caugust once pursued us. Now that Master has advanced to third rank, naturally he wants revenge. Maybe he'll directly massacre the city. Anne was only halfway through when the distant Caugust city suddenly erupted with tremendous noise. She froze in place. Wait, I was just talking. Master wouldn't really massacre the city, would he? The second she said, massacre the city, continuous tremendous noises came from within Caugust city, accompanied by intense ground tremors. Even they, far from the city, could feel slight vibrations underfoot. Kelly and Agu simultaneously stood up and jumped to the ground. Something happened in Caugust. Will Saul be in danger inside? She looked at Agu. These past few days, Saul had reintroduced several consciousness bodies to her, and Kelly knew these consciousness bodies had a special connection with Saul. Agu was concentrating and waiting, but received no signal, so he could only look at Anne's reaction. I haven't received any information either. Anne's previous joking playfulness had disappeared, looking somewhat worriedly at distant Caugust. Soon, they discovered that numerous branches had grown within the city walls, and they could vaguely see several strange fruit-like spheres on them. Looks like it wasn't Saul's doing after all. Kelly crossed her arms in front of her chest. So should we go in to rescue him? I think we should first figure out how to protect ourselves. Anne suddenly grabbed Kelly's arm and leaped backward. The next second, a tree branch as thick as an arm drilled out from underground, grazing the bottom of Kelly's shoe as it stabbed toward the sky. Chapter 739, Kelly shows her power. It was Anne who, due to her keen perception of vibrations after soul armament activation, sensed the approaching crisis and managed to pull Kelly away just in time. As for Agu, he could only fend for himself. Should you take Miss Kelly and retreat from the town first? Agu took flight awkwardly, but his thigh was still slightly scraped. As a consciousness body, an enhanced form of soul existence, such a minor injury would naturally heal quickly. However, Agu discovered a toxin resembling pollution in the wound. This toxin wasn't very potent and would hardly affect him, but it was unexpectedly stubborn. While still dodging branches drilling out from underground, Agu had no way to focus on expelling the toxin. Be careful, the branches are poisonous. He could only warn Anne to protect Kelly first. Hearing Agu's warning, Anne immediately became tense. Master had entrusted Miss Kelly to her. Although she showed no outward reaction, she had inwardly decided not to let Kelly get hurt at all. So Anne immediately transformed into spider form, her 8 spider legs like sharp scythes, ready to cut any approaching enemies into pieces. However, while Anne was fully focused on protecting Kelly, she suddenly felt an extremely special magical power coming from behind her. At the same time, Kelly placed one hand on Anne's back. Don't move. Looking at the branch about to pierce her, Anne hesitated for just a moment before deciding to follow Kelly's instruction, not attacking or defending. Just as the sharp, toxin-laced branch was about to pierce through both of them, Kelly's red hair suddenly floated up. Then an invisible force bypassed Anne and Agu, meeting the branches attacking them. The branches that were about to penetrate Anne's body instantly turned black and crumbled to powder. Not just the branches in front of Anne. With Kelly as the center, A blank zone with a 30-meter diameter was cleared out. Both Anne and the more distant Agu were shocked by Kelly's area-clearing operation. Although they had witnessed more powerful attacks before, Kelly was only a first-rank senior wizard. She could already perform area-clearing magic that only second-rank wizards possessed. And the attack effect was quite domineering. Most importantly, this was magic they had never seen before, and they couldn't even immediately identify what attribute of magic it was. "Can I move now?" Looking at the ground covered with branch fragments that looked like they'd been struck by lightning, Anne asked cautiously. "Yes," Kelly said with slight pride, withdrawing her hands as her floating hair fell back down. "This move of mine can't avoid moving targets, so once I say you can't move, don't move." Agu also gave Kelly a complex look, but didn't ask much. He landed beside Kelly and Anne, saying to both of them, "Good. Now quickly leave this place while you can and head further east." "No," Kelly stepped forward. "Saul is still waiting for us to activate the outer auxiliary magic formation. Even if you plan to stay behind, it's too dangerous for one person to guard here alone." Agu hesitated for a moment. From Kelly's recent attack magic, she was indeed suitable for guarding beside the auxiliary formation, but he was worried the enemy might be too powerful and harm Kelly. From Agu's intuition and his observation of Kaugus City, these branch attacks were just the beginning of a disaster. Suddenly, rustling sounds came from around the three of them. They looked around alertly and actually saw the human-headed caterpillars that had previously disappeared, drilling out from cracks that had opened in the ground. Most of these caterpillars' heads belonged to elderly people, with only a few young ones. They stared wide-eyed at the three of them, having completely lost human rationality, like a pack of wild beasts. The two human-headed caterpillars in the lead were the same two Kelly had seen in the uninhabited town. "These bugs, they couldn't be what the residents here turned into, could they?" Anne stamped her feet, looking displeased. So the master of Kaugus City not only didn't spare the people in the city, but also turned the surrounding ordinary people into monsters. What exactly are they trying to do? These human-headed caterpillars crawled toward the three of them in undulating motions, while Kelly's group stood guard in front of the auxiliary formation without retreating. Just as the enemies were about to crawl into Kelly's 30-meter attack range, Kelly's red hair floated up again, magical power circulating as she prepared a new round of magic. But before entering the 30-meter range, those human-headed caterpillars suddenly raised their heads and spat out strings of silk toward them. This silk wasn't aimed at them, but was sprayed on the ground around the three of them. It seemed they wanted to use the silk to trap them in a circle. The silk was spat faster and faster, and within a few breaths, they had already formed a half-meter-high silk wall. "Are they trying to trap us here?" Anne said grimly, "Probably more than that. They seem to be preparing to spin a cocoon to wrap us inside." She directly tore off one of her spider legs and threw it like a short spear. The sharp tip cut through the air with a whoosh and stuck to the silk wall. However, the seemingly fragile silk wall wasn't pierced through, and Anne's thrown spider leg didn't disappear but was directly stuck to it. Seeing this, Agu directly cast a fireball spell. However, strangely, the blazing fireball also stuck to the silk wall. This completely defied common sense. Because the opponents hadn't entered the 30-meter attack range, Kelly had been holding her magic ready but unable to release it. Maintaining the magic in a ready-to-activate state, she was somewhat breathless. That's not purely physical silk. Agu's expression was grave. "If we get stuck to it." Anne immediately turned to Kelly and said, "Miss Kelly, we should retreat first." "All right," Kelly immediately nodded. When it was time to be tough, be tough. When it was time to be cowardly, be cowardly. Kelly wasn't conflicted at all. Agu remained in place. "You go first. I'll wait here for Master's orders. No matter what, someone had to be responsible for activating the auxiliary magic formation Saul had set up here. Anne wanted to exchange tasks with Agu, but he still stood closest to the silk without retreating. Time didn't allow for further argument. Anne grabbed Kelly's arm again, preparing to escape before the silk wall closed. Just as the two were about to fly out of the silk wall's encirclement, they suddenly discovered a dark green cloud had appeared above those caterpillars. That green cloud had somehow descended to less than 10 meters from the ground, and then water drops began falling from it, like rain. Only this rainwater was also dark green and carried a stench of rotten fish and shrimp. When the rainwater dripped onto the human-headed caterpillars below, it immediately corroded large holes in their bodies. Soon, all the human-headed caterpillars on the ground were corroded into pools of sticky fluid. They looked as disgusting as vomit. After these human-headed caterpillars were killed, Kelly discovered that the silk walls around them had disappeared in an instant. Anne's spider leg appeared in a more distant location, stuck in the ground. Agu's fireball spell had also scorched a patch of nearby earth. Kelly took a breath and was immediately choked by the fishy stench, coughing violently. Cough, cough, it was an illusion. Cough, cough, not a simple illusion. If Anne and I had tried to fly out of the silk just now, we probably would have felt like we couldn't get through and were stuck by the silk. Agu nodded as well. Yes, these bugs cast a wall we couldn't escape from in our minds. No wonder they could shoot so far and so fast. Anne gritted her teeth. Mixing physical and mental attacks, how devious. Are you all right? Seeing the three of them all complaining about the silk, the person who had helped them waited without receiving any words of thanks, and no one even discussed his poison cloud rain. He had to silently emerge from the shadows, caring for the three of them while mentally cursing them. Finally, when the rescuer took the initiative to show himself, Agu immediately turned around. Thank you for saving us just now, sir. After just the first sentence, Agu's voice disappeared. He looked at the special wizard robe the newcomer wore, and his heart sank. The wizard who had just helped them was actually from the tribunal. Chapter 740, Dispelling Darkness. After recognizing the newcomer's identity, Kelly became more vigilant. After the wizard who had killed the caterpillars with poison clouds emerged, 3 more wizards followed behind him. These people all wore the tribunal's black standard wizard robes. The 3 behind had expressionless faces, while only the first man who had helped them smiled. Caugust is no longer safe. You'd better leave here quickly. Agu and Anne stayed close to Kelly's side. Having learned much about etiquette while following Grand Duke Keela these past 2 years, Kelly stepped forward and bowed to the tribunal members. Hello, I am first-rank Wizard Kelly. May I ask how to address you, sir? The man opposite smiled amiably. No need for such formality. I'm Shadu, a second-rank wizard from the tribunal, here on orders to investigate Caugust City. Agu stepped forward. Excuse me, sir, what happened in Caugust City? Why did these monsters suddenly appear? Shadu shook his head. We just arrived and aren't particularly clear on the situation either, but seeing what's happening in the city. He pointed to the distant, terrifying sight of branches still waving in midair. This is probably no longer something we can handle. I'll report to the tribunal and request a third-rank wizard to come deal with it. Then he said to Kelly, there are still magical fluctuations underground. There should be more than just these monsters. We'd better leave first. After speaking, Shadu waved his hand, and 2 wizards behind him stepped forward, seemingly intent on forcibly taking Kelly away regardless of her wishes. At this moment, Anne, who had been silent, suddenly tugged at Kelly's sleeve. You should leave with the tribunal, sir, first. I'll stay here to wait for Master to come out. Kelly didn't want to leave either, but seeing Anne give her a meaningful look, Thinking the other party must have some plan, she quickly considered for a moment and nodded in agreement. However, the two approaching tribunal wizards weren't very satisfied. Just as they were about to say something, they saw Shadu wave his hand, indicating they needn't worry about it. So Kelly and Agu left the town first with the tribunal members. Under the protection of several tribunal wizards, Kelly had just left the town when she suddenly saw a red beam of light shooting skyward from somewhere inside the town. Then, in distant places, where the exact locations couldn't be clearly seen, 4 more red beams successively rose. After these 5 beams shot into the sky, they suddenly made a sharp turn and headed toward Kaugust in the center. The beams entered Kaugust's inner city without obstruction, completely unimpeded by the isolation barrier outside. But once all the red light entered the inner city, all the phenomena in the sky disappeared, as if those 5 magnificent beams had just been for show. Although knowing she had only helped draw an auxiliary magic formation, such minimal commotion still made Kelly somewhat doubt what use the formation Saul had her setup actually had. Shadu, walking in front of Kelly, was also attracted by the recent commotion. After all the red beams in the sky entered Kaugust's inner city and disappeared, his gaze gradually moved toward Kelly. Noticing Shadu's stare, Kelly responded with an innocent smile without embarrassment, as if the recent events had nothing to do with her whatsoever. Somewhat unexpectedly for Kelly, Shadu showed no anger at all. He even smiled and said, "Excellent. It seems there's already a third-rank wizard in Kaugust City. Then I won't have to go through the trouble of returning to seek help." The other 3 tribunal wizards simply said nothing, standing quietly to the side. Before long, Anne also emerged from the town. Before coming out, she had already observed Kelly's situation and found the atmosphere seemed normal. Obviously, even if the tribunal wizards suspected the light beams were related to Kelly, they hadn't actually made things difficult for them. Anne composed herself and ran over. "Thank you for your hard work." Before Kelly could speak, Shadu opened his mouth. "Not hard work at all," he even smiled. "May I ask, is it Wizard Saul who is inside Kaugust City?" Yes. Saul's second entry into the inverted tree was completely different from his first low-key approach. He flew forward through the pitch-black city, and wherever he passed, houses collapsed, streetlights broke, and the shadows in the darkness that were swept by the whooshing sound of Saul's flight immediately screamed and turned to dust. Moreover, after Saul flew over each area, a red microformation would light up on the street, like torches being lit, gradually growing from sparks into a prairie fire. The fire was burning. Darkness and shadows were driven to invisible corners. Tens of thousands of spirit bodies imprisoned by the inverted tree attempted to attack Saul, but before they could get close, their minds were attracted by the microformations on the ground. Semi-transparent thin threads suddenly emerged from the centers of the microformations, piercing through the heads of each approaching shadow one by one. These shadows were struck as if by heavy blows, all nailed in place. No matter how the inverted tree's branches drove them, they refused to move another step. Behind Saul, such scenes were everywhere. Sensing Herman's location, he immediately turned toward a high-rise building to the side. As he approached, the dark building shed its surface like skin, returning to its original branch form. Cocoons hanging from the branches with only heads exposed swayed gently, the heads also swaying left and right. The branches swayed and the cocoons kept hitting the trunk, making thump, 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 thump sounds. Each time that sound rang out, the world before them darkened a little. Even Saul couldn't escape this effect. The world before his eyes gradually approached complete darkness, with no trace of light remaining. Saul slowly stopped. Unable to see, he could only rely on other perception. Even his perception of Herman's location gradually blurred due to the darkness before him. Having no choice, Saul stopped and waited in place. The only light source in the inverted tree's space now was the hundreds of micromagic formations he had just activated along the way. Like stars in the night sky, they prevented the sky's color from becoming completely monotonous. However, as time passed and more shadows gathered near the microformations, the formation's light gradually dimmed through consumption. The high-rise swayed as if mocking. This underground world built over decades wasn't so easily dismantled. Just then, 5 red beams of light suddenly descended from the world's apex, the horizon. These 5 beams were like dawn, completely tearing through the darkness. When the 5 became one, they were like a newborn sun. The sun thunderously poured into Saul's body as he floated in the air. Fate lines suddenly began moving, weaving new story threads. Saul's body instantly became a mass of entangled, transparent threads, radiating light under the red beams. Light tore through darkness. High-rises, monsters, and shadows could not block it. Devastating in its power, light completely illuminated this black city. Heaven and earth reversed, and the surroundings once again revealed the inverted tree's appearance. With perception no longer hindered, Saul accelerated again, finally spotting the mentally exhausted Herman on a branch at the edge. Herman squinted and finally saw Saul clearly, showing a smile on his face but unable to say a word. He reached into his chest and pulled out a dark red seed. As soon as the seed appeared, it emanated powerful mental fluctuations. Both real and false auras appeared on it simultaneously, quite contradictory. Saul took the seed and carefully sealed it in his right palm. Now he too could enter the tree heart space. Saul grabbed the weakened Herman. Then Herman transformed into a black light and disappeared into the diary that suddenly appeared in his palm. Saul closed the pages with a snap. Now, let us go thank Wizard Bethstana face to face.